Okay.
And I'd like to call to order the Shakopee School District School Board regular business meeting for May 12, 2025. Tiffany, can you please do the roll?
Zidek.
Here.
Valdez.
Here.
Peterson.
Here.
Smith.
Here.
Aldrich.
Here.
Johnson.
Here.
Brophy.
Here.
Michelle. And Shania.
Here.
Please join me in the pledge of allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, good evening, everybody. Next on our agenda is the favorite part of our meetings, is the Savor Pride portion of our meeting. And we are... Andy's getting ahead of himself. First up is item 3.1, the introduction of our newest student school board member, Brian Fan, who's here. We've got a slide up for Brian. We conducted interviews with a number of excellent candidates, and I said this before, it's just always inspiring to talk to these future leaders, and Brian is no exception. So it was a tough decision, but we selected Brian, and we're pleased to have him here tonight. So do you have any words, anything you want to say?
I would just like to say that I'm really excited for my position next year and the year following that, and I would like to thank all of you guys for giving me an opportunity to share my voice and represent the Shakopee student body.
Great, well, thank you. Looking forward to working with you starting in July. So let's all welcome Brian.
Could we do one quick picture since he's here?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. Just right over here.
Should we chat as the mentor too, I think?
Oh, yeah.
Sure. Be good. And
Over
where do you
here
work?
works great.
Over here.
Yeah. Is that okay, right? Yeah. Okay. So the real Brian can stand in front of the
Yeah.
Great hair. You guys want to just get a little closer? Thank you so much. Thank you.
Good to see you.
Welcome. Next on our agenda is item 3.2, Aspiring Teachers 2025 Student Scholarships. And our presenter is Sarah Wereberg, our Assistant Director of LTE. And is Shauna here? She's on the list.
This is a very busy season, and people have a lot of conflicts. I'm really speaking on behalf of Shauna Wilson and Annie Williams, who've been doing the bulk of the coordinating of this grant. So we have a really amazing Grow Your Own grant that we have received multiple times in a row. And you can go to the next slide. So we have $500,000 in 2025, and it's been used for the creation of this Educators Rising Club for Student Education Competition, FCCLA, which is Family, Career, Community Leaders of America, the creation of Aspiring Teacher Scholarship, which is very exciting, and supporting career exploration through college visits. So this grant, like I said, we've already gotten $750,000, but we've continued with the $500,000. We're doing some great, awesome things with it. So Educators Rising Club, over 50 participants, have had over 50 participants in college visits, student competitions, and service projects. And we've had over 45 Shakopee High School seniors sign letters of intent to enter education in the last 2 years. So this program is really doing a lot to get our high school students excited about becoming teachers, give them a sense of what the awesome life you get to live if you become an educator. And it's working. We're having a lot of interest. It's been very fun. In terms of that FCCLA competition, we do have 5 Shakopee students qualify for nationals. So the Aspiring Teacher Scholarships, this is a really cool part of this program. These scholarships are awarded to students of color who will major in education. The Grow Your Own grant is something for men to be they're really trying to increase the number of teachers of color that we have in our classrooms, and that's where the intent behind all of this money. With the aspiring teacher scholarships, it guarantees Shakopee placement for student teaching and for 2 years of employment. It funds tuition up to $25,000 per year. Students get a MacBook, they get all their licensing fees paid, and they get check-in and support from the Grow Your Own coordinator. So it's a pretty phenomenal program and opportunity for students. And in 2023, these 4 students were recipients of the Aspiring Teacher Scholarship. So now they are busy off doing their thing and learning. In 2024, we had these 3 students as recipients of the Aspiring Teacher Scholarship. And this year, we had 1 wonderful recipient of our Aspiring Teacher Scholarship. So very exciting. So yeah, and so Annie and Shauna are the ones that are championing this in the high school and doing a lot to get our students excited. And I do have some special highlights that I'm supposed to read out for you, and I don't want to miss something right here. Let's see, it says, we recently received another grant since we have sent 8 students to college, and that has used up all of our funds. With this new grant, we'll be able to sustain the scholarship for the next 2 to 3 years and send an additional 8 to 10 students to college for education. In addition, we fund our Educators Rising Club and send students to the national competitions in education through the FCCLA. And we want to give a really big shout out to Shauna Wilson, who's doing a ton of the work and the support to the championing of students in high school. So that's it. It's a really big thing. We're really proud.
It's wonderful. And so the goal is for like these 8 students that they would all come back to Shakopee if possible? Yeah.
Yeah, so, and I think that was a really brilliant right into the grant, is that they come back to Shakopee to work for 2 years after they get their license. So they're guaranteed employment here with the hopes of, right? So it truly is growing your own, maintaining your own, keeping your own, and hopefully students will be for the long haul.
And Chair Smith, if I may, too, the photo that is on the screen here was from the wonderful event. It's held every year, and Shauna Wilson and Annie and others. That was the most recent photo of folks in our student body for aspiring teachers. So you can see the scholarship recipient and others in there.
It's pretty novel, and we get a lot of kudos from MTE for the innovative model that we are using. So they're looking to us as being pioneers and innovators with how to do Grow Your Own successfully, because not a lot of districts have found the success that we have.
Thank you, sir. All right, Andy.
Okay.
Next, our agenda is item 3.3, our spring activities update, and presenting is Andy Brown, our activities director. Welcome.
All right, thanks. Always good to be here. A little presentation's a little bit Shania heavy today. So we're excited to host the state speech tournament again this year for the second year. It's a fantastic thing to have all these students from all these other schools come for a 2-day tournament. We're hoping to not do it again now for at least another 6 to 8, but we'll be happy to do it again before too long. Our kids that are there, not competing, do an incredible job of hospitality and greeting people and marching around selling ice cream and playing music. And they said we just get just dozens and dozens of positive comments on it. So our coach Justin Bertram is the big organizer, and we just get a lot going. But we had all of these students competed, and we had these 5 students, and the 2 of them on the right are a pair, go into the finals in that place. So you can see on the left there, Shema, who's in the red, took 3rd, Bushra and Fatma on the side took 6th, Shania took 6th, and Abe took 7th in these different categories. So some really great performances there. A side note that Shema, who's in the front in the red, is also one of our 2 chosen graduation speakers. As of about a week ago, we had 12 students audition. They auditioned via video, and then we have seniors and staff members vote on who, in based on those snippets of speeches, who they'd like, and Shane was one of our 2 leading vote getters. Not surprising, usually when somebody on the speech team makes the cut there. And our other one is actually on the next slide as well. So DECA got back a little bit ago from the international conference in Orlando, Florida, where we had all of these students competing. John Schubert was a finalist. So they kind of whittled down, they have these massive numbers and they whittled down depending on the event. Medalist, like Emerson Duncan, the second on the list, means that they kind of made this last batch of 30, and then that gets taken down to somewhere around 15. So John was one of those 15, and then they place the top 10 after that. So those are rough numbers, but all of these students got to go and compete. John is the one whose head is kind of hidden a little bit behind the guy with the blue in the back row there, third from the right, but just to the right of him is his twin brother, so you can kind of get the idea. So John is given a speech. A few years ago, we had twins do it, so we asked about it, and Charles said, absolutely not. That's John's deal. Yep, so we had those students compete. Then on the next one, Shania has qualified for National History Day, which has, I think, been a dream of hers since 6th grade. It's probably when you first did it, yeah, in middle school, yep. And so she's been kind of working and refining, and has gotten a lot of help, I think, from Josh Fish, who's a history teacher, and has been a really committed advisor, and planning on going with to Maryland in June to put this documentary that she's made on the national stage. And part of qualifying is that she's got a mentor from the state who I think had an incredibly long session a few days ago. And yeah.
Talked for 4 hours last week.
Yeah, and so so she got a lot of useful critiques, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but Mr. Fish indicated that you kind of like push your documentary out there and then they say, yeah, remake it from scratch, kind of, so you have to go back and kind of redo the video with all this new guidance. So it's good enough to get you there, now you gotta make it good enough to move, so that's the goal. But yeah, and this is those of you who have been in these meetings for a while probably might remember that we kicked this off just because Shania was so interested in doing it. And so when she was a 9th grader, we just had her, actually even as an 8th grader, just found kind of a mentor who would help her out. And then in 9th grade, we kind of said, okay, we can find someone to do it, and got a couple more kids. And then she's been working hard to recruit, so the club is just kind of growing organically. And so it's just a great example of what I feel like my job is, which is just to find what kids are interested and excited and just help give them the avenue to do it. So we're excited for her to be heading out there. On the next one, as we just talked about, we have the FCCLA. It's just worth noting here that 3 of these 5 students that are going are the recipients of the Grow Your Own grants, and so that's covering a ton of their travel and registration expenses and stuff like that. You know, we put all these national qualifiers and things out there, and those we don't budget for any of those things. We don't cover it. At the cheapest, they tend to run about $1,000 a student when all the things are factored in, and some of them significantly more. So there's a lot of fundraising and paying, and so that's just another place that the Grow Your Own grant is helping last year and this year as well, getting some students there without needing to cut those checks, without needing to do the fundraising, some of those things. So really, really helpful. There. So those students are headed to Orlando as well in July. We had the Lead Talent Show just a couple weeks ago, so just a couple snippets of that. We had, I think, 17 acts, some faculty, celebrity judges, and just a wide variety of performers. I didn't have a photo of the winners, but it was a group of girls calling themselves the Kajabi dancers, and did kind of this dance/comedy routine that brought the house down. So they were the winners there. Next up, what we're really excited about, we've got Harry Potter and the Cursed Child this weekend, and you may have seen some of the snippets that made the news, some stories that were there, which were pretty great, and we have sold out the Friday night show, which is in the thrust stage, and so I don't think that we have ever filled that auditorium for any concert or anything that's ever been there. So we've got every seat is spoken for right now. So if you're intending to go, you should probably get in and get a ticket for Saturday, Sunday. Not going to be one of those that you can just walk up and get to. And if you can't make it to any of those 3 performances, Christy might be able to tell you how to sneak your way into Thursday.
And Mr. Brown,
yeah.
I can play the quick WCCO
Sure.
one with your outstanding son that's in there as well.
Yeah.
craft and wizardry from the world of Harry Potter.
Shakopee High School is among a select group of schools chosen to perform Harry Potter and the Cursed Child.
Only 29 schools across the country made the cut. Photojournalist Tony Peterson swung by the school today to learn why this honor is in fact magical. It's Harry Potter and the Cursed Child, and then we're doing the high school edition here.
I mean, you are working with students constantly. One moment. Silencio. All right, where were we? How did we do this? It became available for general rights back in May of last year. So when I saw it was available, I knew our students would really enjoy putting this story on stage, and so I went ahead and applied for the rights, and they were granted to us. And we've been preparing for this adventure ever since.
The rehearsals are going great. These are actually donated from Stratasys, and these are all 3D printed with a really high impact polymer.
This is a really technically complex and challenging show, so our students have really risen to that occasion.
It's just wonderful to see all these different brilliant creative minds come in and add their own spin on all of these different parts of the show.
Hi, I'm Savannah. I'm one of the stage managers, and we tell our runners to move things on and off stage.
It's a really fun story. It really brings people together.
I'm Valerie, and I'm the other assistant stage manager for Stage Left, and we keep the magic going.
It's beyond cool. Like, the lighting is something I haven't ever seen in any of the productions I've been here at the high school before. Zoomed in onto where the main characters will be during the show.
Our house crests were designed by a really wonderful group of students in the Arts and Communication Academy.
I was excited, but I was also very stressed because of all the guidelines that follow with this. We can't do anything from the show, from the movies, can't do anything from Broadway. So everything that we created had to be based off of what the book says and what the scripts say.
We do a lot with our academies at Shakopee to really communicate with them. For example, we were working with the Arts and Com to design things like the house crest.
You can see our set is incredible. It's amazing. It's going to just wow anyone who comes to see the show.
So it's really cool to see when we're all here what kind of magic we can make on stage.
Come see Shakopee's Harry Potter and the Cursed Child. Hope to see you there.
So it's a real honor, but also a real awesome opportunity to show what we can do.
Maybe you can see the resemblance there. Younger residents of my house. All right. Yeah. So we're just really excited about that. We had problems last weekend. Third year in a row, Canterbury Event Center continues to be a good venue for us, and we're figuring out better ways to make it work and fill it up. And so that's been really good. Another kind of highlight this spring, something fun that's been going on is we've hired a new ultimate frisbee coach. Ty Stavinsky is actually an alumni who graduated just 2 years ago and is coming back and coaching our team while he's a student at the U. And just kind of by quirk of other programs kind of struggling to get enough numbers, we wound up first incorporating a handful of kids from Eden Prairie, and then got a handful of kids from the Chaska program, which are themselves from Chaska and Southwest Christian. So we have this, we're hosting kind of this big co-op program that's really helped kind of our numbers and our success. So they're having a really successful season right now. Another thing, just to bring up, I'll try to send something out before it happens, but near, I think it's May 28th, I'll have to remember my date, Wednesday morning, we're doing kind of the fine arts equivalent of the athletic signing ceremony. We brought it in a couple years ago, and then I put it on a little hiatus, but we're gonna bring it back this year and kind of keep it in perpetuity, where we just sort of honor our kids who are going on to fine arts opportunities, whether that's a BFA or joining collegiate ensemble, or those who have gotten music scholarships and things like that. Particularly this year, we have just a lot of talent going out in that senior class, and a lot of kids who are trying to pursue these arts opportunities at a higher level. So we're hoping to do that. And we just recently had, as usual, a full slate of all state band and choir recipients, but there is a band concert in 40 minutes, so that takes a whole bunch of them out. So we'll invite them on June 9th, and hopefully we'll talk about those students and see most of them there. So I think that is all of the things I wanted to mention. So as always, lots happening. So, thanks for having me.
Thank you.
And as usual, I'll go over to band. See what
Thanks, Andy.
Next on our agenda is item 4, the consideration of the agenda as presented.
So moved. Second.
Have a motion by Brophy and a second by Aldrich. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Next on our agenda is item 5, public comment. This is the time where members of the public can participate in the meeting without being part of the meeting agenda. A member of the public may address the board on an agenda topic or on another topic. We allocate a total of 15 minutes for public comment at this meeting. Each individual speaker may speak for up to 2.5 minutes. The sign up for public comment has been conducted online and in person prior to this evening's meeting. No one has signed up for public comment prior to this evening's meeting. We will move on to the next item on the agenda. Next on our agenda is item 6, consent items. So we have some personnel items and the school board meeting minutes.
Make a motion to approve.
A motion by Aldridge and a second by Peterson. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Next on our agenda is item 7. This is a resolution for donations approval. See our donations on the screen there.
I just would like to thank so many people in our community for their generosity over the last few weeks with Teacher Appreciation Week specifically. You can see here that there's a lot of donations for that event to make that as successful as it is. And also there's one other item here, Gabriel Christensen. I noted on here that the amount of instruments and money that he has raised with an Eagle Scout project to start the play program here in Shakopee is very commendable, and probably something that maybe we could highlight in a safer spotlight or at the beginning of the meeting sometimes. That's truly outstanding work by one of our students, so just want to make sure we call that out.
I'll make a motion to approve the donations as presented.
Second.
A motion by Brophy and a second by Aldrich. Any further discussion? Tiffany, can you please do the roll?
Siddick,
Yes.
Valdez,
Yeah.
Peterson,
Yes.
Smith,
Yes.
Aldridge,
Yes.
Johnson,
Yes.
Brophy.
Yes. Resolution passes. Next on our agenda is an information item, item 8.1, executive budget summary for fiscal year 26 preliminary budget. And here to present is Bill Menazzi, our Director of Finance and Operations.
Good evening. Thank you for the opportunity to present for your review tonight the 2025-2026 adopted budget executive summary. Before I begin, thank you to our communications team, Tiffany and Amber, for the graphics and color that they've put into this document. Our team in finance is great with the numbers, but as I've often said before, the graphics and color are not our specialty, and so thank you to the communications team for their hard work in getting this document ready. I will give you the headline that I'm not planning to go over all 44 pages tonight in this document. I'm sure my colleagues behind me are devastated to hear that. But that's not to minimize the importance of the document. I expect very few, if any, changes to this between now and when we're going to ask the school board to approve this on June 23rd. So my encouragement, as it is every year, is to get this to you ahead of time so you can review it. And please reach out either through Dr. Redmond or to me directly if you have any questions on the document between now and June. That being said, I do want to review 9 pages, and they're in kind of all over the document. So if you want to note these on the table of contents, I'm planning to review page 3, 5, and 9. And then we'll go and look at some enrollment information on pages 15 and 16. If you're looking to do sort of a deep dive self-study, I'm not going to go over it tonight, but pages 25 through 35 are sort of an overview of all of the different funds on the revenue and expenditure side. And then I'll go over some of the informational section, specifically pages 38, 39, and 40, and then just a quick touch point on page 40. We'll dive in. Oh boy. Sorry. Thank you.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
You can see that in finance we use Dell, and here is my specialty for so starting with page 3.
I can run it for you if you want.
Oh, that's okay. Thank you.
Yeah.
A budget is nothing more than developing some assumptions, and you can see that our major budget assumptions in this fiscal 26 budget are included in the bullet points on the page. 3 main assumptions are operating levy authority of $1,371.84 per pupil for taxes payable 2025. As you recall, our operating levy is tied to inflation. There's a 2.34% inflation factor. The standard operating levy cap for next year is $2,266 per pupil. The state aid per pupil formula increase is 2.74%, bringing the formula allowance for fiscal 26 to $7,281 per pupil. And then our enrollment projection, our budget enrollment projection of 7,457 students for next year, a decrease of 82 students, or about 1% from this year. So those are the main budget assumptions that we use in our budget building document. Skipping now to page 5, if you were to ask what is sort of the main page that you would want to really zero in on, it would be page 5, which shows our statement of operating and non-operating funds, both from a revenue and expenditure standpoint and from a fund balance standpoint. So starting first with the general fund, that's what we've spent the bulk of our time looking at in recent meetings. You can see that reading from left to right, you'll see the fund balance, and in the general fund, that would be the fund balance in total, to include not only our unassigned fund balance, but our restricted fund balances, assigned, committed, everything is rolled up into that general fund in total. You can see the revenue in the general fund of $125.5 million, and expenditures in the general fund of $132.2 million. And as we go down below, you can see the fund balance impact. I'll get to that shortly. And then looking at the food service fund, we're projecting to start next year with a fund balance of just shy of $2.9 million, so a healthy fund balance in food service, and just a slight deficit projected in food service right now that's fairly conservative budgeting related to some unknowns on food prices and employee contracts for next year. The community services fund, you'll see is projected to start at $190,000, and we're projecting a slight surplus in the community service fund. So good to see that. Lisa Ron, our community ed director, develops much of that budget projection, and community service fund is projected to end the year just shy of $600,000 as of June 2026. Our debt service fund, which is the revenue used to pay the principal and interest on our voter approved bonds, is projected to be relatively stable next year, as is our internal service fund, our ISF fund. That's our self-funded health and dental account. That is projected to end the year at $1.43 million. So those of you who have been on the board for a while, you'll recall that a handful of years ago that ISF fund was in a pretty critical low point and has rebounded to a healthy financial position projected for next year. And then lastly, our trust fund, which is OPEB, stands for Other Post-Employment Benefits, and our scholarship account is projected to end the year at $5.7 million. So down below, you can see the fund balance breakout. And we've looked at this previously. So our unassigned fund balance in the general fund is projected to end next year at $13.18 million, which is good for 10%, which is the mid-range of our fund balance policy. In order to do so, we are expecting to utilize a significant portion of our restricted fund balance, which you can see towards the bottom under the restricted category. We're also projecting to use some of our assigned fund balance, so about 1.12 million in our assigned fund balance, which is what it's there for. It's an assignment for a subsequent year budget need. So that's really the overall measure of our financial health, and the general fund is that unassigned fund balance. With that, I will go to page 9. Which is really our budget process and history. So you can see that we started here at the school board level in December. Feels like a long time ago, but that was our first official action on the fiscal 26 budget, was approval of the calendar 2025 levy and corresponding taxes. So that set the taxes for fiscal 2026. We really started our budget building process at the school board level on February 24th. The Finance and Facilities Committee on February 24th with a review of the fiscal 26 budget assumptions and financial projections. We then spent both meetings in April looking at the next year's budget and long-range financial projections. Here we are tonight looking at next year's budget, and then as I mentioned, we will bring this budget for school board approval next month in June. With that, I'll skip to page 15. Spend a little bit of time here looking at some of our enrollment history and also our projections. So as we all know, our revenue is built on or paid based off of the number of students that we have, and so setting an enrollment target and meeting or exceeding that target is critical to the bottom line. We've talked about our enrollment projections in detail. Both at the Finance and Facilities Committee and also at the school board meeting, and you can see that we've been in a period of natural decline in student enrollment. So you can see dating back to fiscal year 2020, we had 8,189 students, and we've been in a declining enrollment period since then. As I mentioned, next year we're forecast at 7,457 students. So over the last, since 2020, our enrollment has decreased by about 9%. Or about 732 students, which is driven by declining birth rates in Scott County. So that certainly creates some budget challenges, but it's nothing new. It's something that we know, and it's something that's factored into our budget projections that you see. At the last meeting in April, the school board approved engaging with Hazel Reinhardt to do an enrollment study, and I do have that narrative in here as well. We expect to receive that enrollment study results in June. So I may need to update. I mentioned about the updates. I may need to update the language here a little bit based off of when we received that enrollment study. And then going to our enrollment projections, you can see that our enrollment projections are driven by assumptions around enrollment, and you can see we have 5 main assumptions. We have a kindergarten projection assumption, an increase of 4 students from this year, 424 students. Kindergarten through grade 8, growth projection based on enrollment trend data. We increase our enrollment by 68 students from grade 8 to grade 9, primarily driven by students from SACs that come in as 9th graders. Post-secondary enrollment options, PSEO estimates, about 60 students, and then early childhood and tuition estimates based on a 5-year history. And you can see where our enrollment is projected to go not only for next year, but our declining enrollment projection is forecast to continue for fiscal 27 and 28 as well. Okay, so getting to the end here, I'm going to skip all the way to page 38 under the information section. Just an additional information, you can see here is another look at what the board approved in December regarding our truth and taxation meeting and the fiscal 26 operating levy. You can see that in total, our operating levy decreased year over year by about $358,000 or -0.8%. And you can see the breakout by fund. So our general fund was very flat, a decrease of $10,000 on $27 million. Our community service fund increased by about $65,000. and our debt service fund decreased by about $413,000. So that's just included for additional information and obviously has a budget impact for next year. And then our capital projects, our technology levy. So the community, our community generously approved a renewal to our capital projects levy last November. Gosh, that should say November 2024. I'm sorry, I'll have to update that number. Approved a renewal to the capital projects levy last November, and you can see where that number is projected to go. It's tied to our net tax capacity, which has seen nice increases. And you can see that our capital projects technology levy is projected to be about $5.92 million for next year. And then lastly, we've talked at length about our outstanding debt summary, but that's included in this budget report as well. And you can see our 2 debt drops that are coming up here. One starting in fiscal 2027 of about $5 million, and another one in 2031 for another $7 million. So 2 pretty significant debt drops here over the next handful of years. And then at the bottom of the page, our current and outstanding debt for our debt. You can see the date, the original principal amount, and then the current amount outstanding and the final maturity as well. So that's really what's feeding those 2 different debt drops, are those different either general debt or our refunding debt as well. With all that, I'll get to the acknowledgements page. You can see that in June, the grand total budget revenues that the school board will be asked to approve are $167,326,700, and the grand total budget expenditures for next year at $174,016,825. Really the key budget highlights for this budget, we're projected in the general fund to remain at 10% as of June 2026. In order to do that, using a significant portion of our restricted fund balance. And then as we've talked about previously, and Dr. Redmond will discuss later tonight on his finance presentation, looking at some pretty significant budget headwinds starting in fiscal 27. That's all that I had, albeit in a Cliff Notes version for tonight. As I mentioned, if you have any questions on the budget report, I'd be happy to take those either tonight, or if you wanted to follow up in the interim, I'd be happy to take those questions as well.
Let's get right to the first question.
Why is it always me? Okay, fine. I have 2 questions.
Okay.
And they're both on the same page, page 40. 2034, which seems a long time from now, why is there a drop from 6 million to 2 million back up to 6 million for that year? Up higher.
Yeah, I'm trying to look at that based on the final maturities here. Because I don't have a good answer, Joe, off the top of my head. I can certainly look that up, but I'm wondering, trying to do some quick calculations based on the final maturity column. I can look into that in more detail and put it in my Dr. Redmond's draft.
Sounds good, thank you. The other question is, do you know off the top of your head? It's fun to be. How much money that the district saved the taxpayers over the last several years in refinancing and refunding these bonds?
I know our credit rating has been upgraded 3 times, and so that'll help moving forward. I know that's not your question, but if we do have a refunding opportunity or a new debt opportunity, that will help moving forward for lower rates based off of that credit upgrade. In terms of retroactive, gosh, I don't have that. I know I have it in my document somewhere.
It's several million though, correct?
Yes, several million, yes, over the life of the bond. I know we want to quote a number. I know it's out there somewhere. It's another thing I can include in the wrap, but the refunding has saved taxpayers several $1 million over the life of the bonds that you see here.
I should maybe get you a T-shirt with that on.
That would
Or the number.
And just to build on that, because it's always fun to get good news like that, but that money is savings to the taxpayer, that does not come to the district.
Right.
So you do that magic to refinance, and that's direct taxpayer savings that does not come to the district.
Exactly right. Yeah, and I appreciate you saying that I do that magic. That's really our partnership with PMA that plays an important role in that. They do a great job helping us with that process.
We'll get them t-shirts too.
Bill, I have a question. What is the cap for the food service fund? What are we allowed to carry over in that?
I've never seen a formal cap from MDE. That I've seen recommendations in terms of fund balance. Usually what I've seen in other districts is around 6 months. I wouldn't want to see it get too far over that. So that's kind of what I've seen. And obviously, COVID and moving towards free lunches for all, there was that 1 year in particular that really helped our food service fund balance, and that wasn't a Shakopee specific thing. You'll remember the audit that year, it was a big jump in our fund balance, and that was the case for all the school districts that KDB audits. That's another one that I can look into a little bit more.
Because I know where school districts are asking for flexibility with funding and how we can spend their dollars. That was one fund that has been identified as allowing us to have more flexibility, because with the free meals for all, there isn't the expenditures that we typically maybe would have in that fund, because everybody gets free meals. And so a lot of districts' funds just continue to build, but you're not allowed to really spend it. I mean, the restrictions are pretty tight, but I know there's been some loosening of that, and I think there's a lot of requests out there right now at the Capitol for more loosening of the strings related to that fund to help districts with shifting the dollars to help in other areas.
5-6 years ago, that was under $1 million, wasn't it?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, without a doubt, this 2.6 million in terms of a percentage of total expenditures in the food service, that's a very healthy fund balance, to your point.
Right. So if we could take some of that and use it to something else. I mean, I don't know what the odds are of that happening, but if we could have $1 million of that to apply to something else, other programs for kids, that would be very beneficial.
Well, I have one more for you here. So just basically the acknowledgements, the kind of summary page of your presentation here. It shows our budgeted revenues are 167 million and our budgeted expenditures are 174 million, right?
That's correct.
General recap. So I mean, essentially we're eating away at nearly $7 million of our reserves next year. Is that the way I'm thinking that, right?
Yeah, so in total, that's total all funds, okay? And so much of that is the general fund, much of that is utilizing our restricted fund balance. Some of that is our assigned fund. So that restricted fund balance that I mentioned, a significant spend down there, our assigned fund balance, utilizing 1.12 million of that fund balance on our very main at 10. That's a portion of that. We do have small deficit projections, as I mentioned, based largely on conservative budgeting in the food service fund. I think debt service has a small deficit projection. And so that's rolled into there as well, but the bulk of that is general fund.
But essentially that's the financial situation that we're in going forward, is we're spending more than we're bringing in, right?
Correct.
And that would continue each year going forward if we don't do something different, right?
Yes. Yep.
Not the entire amount though, because there's some stuff in there like curriculum purchases, which are bigger in 1 year, where the operating, which we put money away so that there was a fund balance to spend down, knowing that those expenditures are uneven over a period of time. Yeah. But in general, yes.
Yeah, and based on the student enrollment projections, probably the biggest variable in that, right?
So as to illustrate that, and thank you, Mike, that's a great point. You'll see that our operating capital has a planned spend down, so we're projecting in operating capital to start, this is dangerous to do this, start with $3 million in a fund balance and to end next year at 1.2 million. That planned spend on 1.8 million next year, that's based off of curriculum purchases. In other words, 1.8 million of that 7 million that you see on page 43 is related to that. Yes.
You're doing a pretty nice job with the MacBook, I'm impressed.
And is there any, if we get additional funding for the READ Act, would that be put back in? I don't know where that all would go, but would that go back into some sort of a curriculum purchase account, or would that go directly into training teachers to use the new program or curriculum?
So I can answer part of that question. I can answer where it would go. The READ Act funding would go in this restricted other row. That's where the funding for that. It's a restricted revenue category. Just like student personnel aid, library aid, things of that nature, they're all in this area. In terms of allowable uses and things like that. I probably can't speak to that maybe as well as others.
And the expenses related to paid family medical leave are in the budget as well. We took some sort of a guess what that's going to be.
Yes, there's a projection.
More questions from Bill? Thank you, Bill. Okay, thank you.
Next on our agenda is an action item, item 9.1, a one-year pilot for enhanced ninth grade student start date. And here to present is Stephanie Wheelock, the ninth grade academy principal, and Jeff Palicki, the Shakopee High School principal.
Sure, sir.
Yes.
If I can take a moment to introduce the two of them. And their
Please.
So, ninth grade academy principal Stephanie Wheelock approached me some time ago, along with head principal Jeff Palicki, to talk about something that's fairly common in neighboring districts, which is providing our ninth graders an opportunity to have the school to themselves for one day, along with their teachers, support staff, etc. Sort of an orientation where they have the opportunity to get all of their learning materials set, meet their teachers, learn more about the facility, and just generally start to acclimate, to the high school setting. I asked a number of questions, asked for some details about what this would look like, for all of our students, and over time, they've come up with the report that you're going to be hearing this evening. But again, I would say that the practice of giving ninth graders one day in a school without 10th through 12th graders to learn their way around is a fairly common practice. And as you listen to this, this is definitely something that I support.
Thank you so much for the time tonight to go over our proposal. We examine continuously how to best support ninth graders, and we can see some opportunities for further and deeper engagement for not just our staff and students, but with the students getting to know each other to really build that ninth grade community as they're coming into the high school. We know that the ninth grade first semester is a key time for students to not only just to build those skills, but it also is an indicator of how they do throughout high school and really to get to that point of graduation as well. So we know that this is a really impactful time, and we see an opportunity here to provide some additional supports and kind of methods for students to get acclimated to school. So we have a variety of experiences. Getting ready before the school year starts, students come over and engage quite a bit at the high school. And then you can see during the school year, you're probably familiar with many of these opportunities for students to come in and engage and really learn about, not just about Shakopee High School, but the academy model, and really learn about what their future looks like at Shakopee High School. So here's our current orientation structure. We do a scheduled pickup. All students are welcome in the building about 2 weeks prior to the school year. And then our ninth grade orientation has been a week before the school year starts. It is a morning session. We don't provide transportation. And we have found, and you can see in the chart on the right side, that two years ago, 57% of our ninth grade students attended. In the last 2 years, it's been 51% of those students are attending. So our underserved students are the ones that are the most likely to miss this event, and therefore have those extra challenges of being acclimated to school and feeling that sense of belonging or from get-go. And so this is part of the reason that we brought this to Mr. McCloskey, is we'd like to make sure that we're including all students and making this a really important day for all students. So our proposed pilot is to take out that half-day optional orientation a week ahead of time and shift that orientation to the first day and then add on some extra activities so that that first day would be all about ninth grade and getting them comfortable in the building and building that sense of community. So we know that building those early connections matters. Those greater connections are going to help with greater student success. We have a list here of different ways, both academically and social emotionally, that students really need those supports as we transition into high school. And as I mentioned, we really feel like this is that equitable approach to make sure that all students have access to getting started on this and feeling that sense of positivity on that first day of school without the stress of having everyone in the building. All right. As we spent much of our time this year building this plan, we spoke with many different stakeholders. We did speak with several districts in the area, as Mr. McCloskey mentioned. We are one of the few districts in the area that don't do some version of a ninth grade start on the first day. All of the districts I spoke with talk about how important it's been, how the impact has made it, how it has made an impact, measurable impact on their students. So they will be continuing this going forward. You can see we worked with teacher groups, thought about it from as many angles as we could. We collected some information. I'll talk about that a little bit here. Collected information and feedback from teachers, and just starting to explore this with students to think about what student impact would be, or student feedback would be as well. And I think one of the things to remember is that we will continue, if this approved, we will continue to engage those stakeholders. We have a lot more work to do if we're going to be launching this in September. So 2 weeks ago, we brought this to our building leadership team and got feedback from that group in order to make sure we were bringing the best proposal forward to our whole teacher staff last week. Last week, we offered our teachers, all of our teachers in the building, an opportunity to respond to the survey about how they felt about this proposal that we shared with them, and we got 93% of our teachers are in favor of having this on the first day of school. We did get some great feedback too on ideas of ways for teachers to engage, as well as for us to engage the 10th through 12th grade students as well. And this is just more teacher feedback from that survey last week. Yeah, we did there. So what this might look like. We would run a full school day on September 2nd, that day after Labor Day, for ninth grade only in the building. All teachers would be supporting the ninth graders in some way, shape, or form throughout the day. The morning would be dedicated to that orientation. We shift that over so that every student would be able to be there for that time, and we believe that's removing a lot of the barriers because we were providing transportation, food service, etc. for them on the first day. To shift learning for because we want it to be an instructional day for all students, we would ask that 10th through 12th grade students would have an asynchronous learning day, and that would provide them the setup for that second day of school for everyone on Wednesday, September 3rd. Here's an idea of how that pilot might look. I mentioned that morning would be dedicated to the LINK student-led orientation in the morning. And then we have talked about midday having opportunities for students to go through the lunch schedule and really get to know the kids that are in their lunches and giving them access to teachers to support at that time too, so that they really understand the routines around lunch and maybe get to know some other students. And also engage with potentially counselors, with me, with our dean, and really doing that warm welcome in the middle of the day. And then the afternoon we would dedicate to a shortened version of their schedule so they could walk through their schedule, really connect with their teachers, have that passing time with support from teachers and our LINK leaders and student leaders to have that experience of what the whole day would feel like. And then at the end of the day, bringing them out to their buses and making sure that they know all the routines around it without that hustle and bustle of all of the students in the building.
I really love the idea too of doing activities,
taxpayer, right, during lunches, right, if they have an opportunity right from the get-go to get involved, to get connected to an activity after school or before school, I think would be huge too.
So we are bringing this forward to ask for a one-year pilot for this opportunity. And if it was approved, we would spend the next 30 to 60 days really digging into exactly what that would need to look like. I do think a lot about communication that would need to happen with families and students around this day, what it would look like for not just our 9th grade students, but for our 10th and 12th grade students. This is still a day of school, and we have some ideas about the ways that they would engage online as well. I think one of our key components over the next couple of months would be really, how do we know we're being successful with this? We want to examine this and make sure that we know that with spending this time and energy and dedicating the state of 9th graders is having an impact. So that would be something that we're really looking for. What are the things we need to look at? Other districts are saying they're really seeing the impact, but what do we feel like in Shakopee we need to know to make sure that this is going to be successful going forward? And I do the final slide. We have a timeline here of kind of where we've been and then where we anticipate going, just to get ready for this if this were approved.
And one thing I would ask on behalf of the board is, as you're fleshing that out, send that to Tiffany, Jim, and I, so that we share it to the board. And I'm guessing you're already planning on doing that, but.
I think it's, yeah, go ahead. I was just gonna say, I think it's a fantastic idea. I mean, obviously, it's gonna be one of the most intimidating times as a student is going into a big school like this. The only thing I think, if I was a 9th grader, I'd be wondering, do I get out like a day early? No. I'm sure they're gonna do that. Right.
We wouldn't be making any changes at all. So.
You guys are top level.
No. You get this opportunity
exactly.
to be there.
Well, and just to expand on what my colleague just said, like, the data is pretty compelling that the half-day really isn't serving the needs for, half of that population, and not taking into consideration those students are coming from a charter or homeschool or, another environment where you're walking into a small city, let's be honest, right? With 2,800 of your closest friends and teachers and the like. And I think you capitalized on, kind of like, how are we going to measure it? One of the pieces I do want to call out, the LINK program, and I think students, the 11th and 12th graders, be part of that experience for the 9th graders. I mean, that's going to lend itself. That's just a huge win in my mind. Other districts, what are they using as their kind of performance indicators or their measures of success? Do we have an opportunity to leverage some of that in addition to what other metrics you're trying to measure?
Attendance, that consistent attendance, especially if we know they're coming in with some challenging attendance issues. A lot of it is academics too. How are students doing academically? Are they able to, carry through and really see pass their classes and do well? I also think there's some, it's harder to say quantitatively, like examine, but kind of that well-adjusted. How are students doing? Are they reaching out for supports? Do they know where to go if they do need help? So those are the kind of the 3 big buckets that they talked about, but then how do we actually measure those pieces? And that's something we really put to our team to make sure we're doing it.
Have you tried collecting feedback from the freshman class right now in the building?
I did start to do that recently. I wanted to make sure that this was going to be a viable option, so I have started working with 9th graders. Actually met with the 9th grade leadership team this afternoon, and they were all excited about this. Gave me some ideas of some things that they're also committed to engaging more with it. But they all was the anxiety that we talked about, like this, they see that this is being really.
I would recommend asking the students in the building, the freshmen in the building right now, if this resolution passes, how much, would it have made a difference in terms of the belonging they feel at school right now, how the stress levels they feel, and then maybe that could be a starting point for the data you collect next year, metrics you collect next year for you to compare.
Question and comment. Question is, did you get any feedback from the teachers that didn't like this idea?
There are a couple, yes, and I do have some things. I have teed up some conversations that I need to have.
I was just wondering what comments they had.
A lot of it is barriers around, I teach this elective class, what is that gonna look like for me? I'm thinking about, that switch to the online learning that first day. And I'm open to it, but help me, like, let's talk through this from some different angles. I haven't dug deep into, who is it that's opposed and what their opposition is yet, but we'll get to that.
Yeah, because I love this, not only for the students, because the students, going into that city is overwhelming, and I think it not only will help the students kind of take a deep breath and go, I think the parents will be kind of relieved too. So I would think that just the parents would be a nervous wreck, especially if it's their first child in going to the high school and not having them bump into a senior who could be a foot taller than them on that first day. Just might just bring down anxiety levels for all.
I have a question, maybe it's more of a comment. I like the idea a lot, but I really worry about that first day for 10, 11, and 12, and how much, number one, how much learning is actually gonna happen on the first day of school. And typically, there's not a lot of learning that probably happens. And second, how will that impact attendance? Because I really think that kids are gonna be like, well, I don't have to do anything. I don't have to log in, I don't have to, especially if maybe what if they're new to the district and they're in a 11th grader and just moved into town? How are they gonna know how the system works? I just have a little bit of reservation about that day for 10, 11, and 12, because is there any benefit to the asynchronous?
We think about that too, and and that would be part of that process too, as far as when Stephanie was talking about really flushing that out about what that looks like. But I think about number one, the resources that we have for students, right, to be able to have access to them. And I think you can have concerns around, will some see it, will some won't see it, and I think when you think about it, we manage that every day, right? When kids are gone, we make sure that when kids come, they have resources and the tools that they need to be successful. I think specifically on that first day of school, thinking to when I was a teacher of all the onboarding, a lot of the procedural, a lot of setting the groundwork that you do, right? And again, it is something to think about. Could there be something for our students new to Shakopee, who was at 10th, 11th, 12th grade? We've talked about that, right? So what could that look like for students that are completely new? But then for our other returning students who will have their MacBook with them, that would really be a good opportunity to lay the groundwork for, whether we're talking about, the work that we've done with developmental designs and social emotional learning. We could get a head start on some of that work, like a who am I, or, biographies, that when we come to school on the 3rd, now we're gonna do an activity around that. And we could design things in a way that, isn't gonna exclude anybody or leave anybody out. But no, I think, Christy, we're on the same page. Is anytime you look at anything where you've got one class in and others that are not, you are kind of weighing, well, what are the benefits? And we feel in this case that, the benefits really outweigh the negatives, but that's what we need to try it. We need to try it once to see how that pans out. And then part of our work moving forward is how do we make that as meaningful and robust of a day for our 10th through 12th graders as possible.
I have the same thought as Christy, and I guess just coming out another way, it's like we're giving a lot to the 9th graders that really see all the benefits, but it does come at a cost. We are taking something away, and those minutes are so precious in the school year, and it seems like we need to protect them as much as we can. But I think the benefits outweigh the negatives, but there is a cost.
Yep.
So it's a one-year pilot, right? Do you feel there'll be enough information after 1 year to say this was, a success, unquestionable, good use of time, to the same questions, whether asynchronous learning, And, and I'm probably the witness, but I know we've saw the statistics having to do with the importance of attendance in 9th grade and how that metric correlates to the potential to graduate, 4 years later. And so as we're weighing that balance, I would hope our 11th and 12th graders, generally speaking, have that level of maturity and will be able to do those, some of those other kind of off-cycle learning experiences and do that well. 10th grade, I guess we could certainly make a case that, sophomore jinx, they're still maybe working off some of the kinks from the first year. I really love what Shauna suggested in terms of when we interview the 9th graders and potentially even extend that to the existing 8th graders. What do you want to see in 9th grade, or what are some of your greatest concerns?
I really think it's worth collecting feedback from the student body. Like, I think it's, beneficial to talk to the teachers and everyone, but I think hearing directly from the students and what they're looking for would be important data, especially if you consider new 10th, 11th, and 12th graders that will not get that same first impression of school that the freshmen will be getting. I think the data is important.
I'll make a motion to approve the 1-year pilot for the 9th grade student start date.
I'll second.
The motion by Peterson, the second by Brophy. Further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Next on our agenda is another action item, item 9.2, type 3 transportation vendor recommendation. And back to present is Bill Benazzi, our Director of Finance and Operations.
Thank you. Much easier to navigate a one-page memo here than a 4-page summary. We went, so on your screen, you'll see a memo, type 3. And type 3 is really van transportation, largely vans or small school buses, largely special ed transportation related, not exclusively special ed transportation related. And just for context, we're talking, this year we're in the 90 to 95 students are transported through type 3 transportation, so not a real large portion of our student population, but a very important population of our student population from a transportation standpoint. So I'd just like to go over a little bit of information here. So our type 3 current contract is with Collaborative Student Transportation, CST for short, and that expires at the end of this year. We did a request for quotations, RFQ for short, on a new contract, a 2-year contract commencing July 1st, 2025. So I'd just like to go over a couple of things regarding our process, the quotes that we received, a little bit of information on a model overview. While it seem simple, I think it'd be helpful to the final outcome to go over a little bit with the transportation model overview, some cost analysis and recommendation in summary as well. So our process, we initially held a transportation RFQ meeting in February and a mandatory informational meeting for prospective service providers in March. We held that online because there were several providers that are national companies that attended this as well. We received 9 quotes and evaluated each against our needs and expectations for type 3 transportation. You can see the 9 quotes that we received. Those that are underlined, those being 4.0 school services, CST, Everdriven, First Alt, and Palmer Bus Service, indicates a service provider interview that took place. I mentioned about the model overview. So there's really 2 different models, and I'm paraphrasing here. This is our words, not included in the vendor information. But there's what we refer to as a broker model, which is our current service model. The service provider acts as a transportation broker and subcontracts transportation routes to area van services. As I mentioned, that's our current model. And then more of the traditional transportation model. So when you see that, think the traditional model that we have with Palmer Bus, with the big buses. So the transportation company owns their own vans, they have their own drivers, they provide more of a traditional model from a transportation standpoint. Cost analysis, so this is some good news. You can see based off of usage, and again, the best way to provide an apples to apples comparison is based on current usage, knowing that usage changes from year to year and actually week to week and month to month regarding type 3 transportation. But based off our current usage, we're paying in the neighborhood of $1.92 million per year for our type 3 transportation. And Palmer Bus, the quote for next year is a little bit less than that. So $1.87 million for fiscal 26, which would be year one of the contract, and $1.926 million in the second year of the contract, which would be fiscal 27. So then finally, under recommendation, we are recommending that the school board award the type 3 transportation primary service contract to Palmer Bus for a 2-year term, commencing, as I mentioned, with the 2025-26 school year. And then, if needed, we're recommending a supplemental service contract to First Alt, who does provide that broker model type contract. And the supplemental service would be utilized if Palmer is unable to fulfill a particular transportation need. Once in a while, just to elaborate on that, once in a while something will come up and a student that's located nowhere near our school district boundary will require transportation, and sometimes that's really difficult to be flexible on that and adjust to that request. We would hope that Palmer would be able to do that, but in instances where they may not be able to do that, we would recommend contracting with First Alt for that type of service. Again, that may never happen, but if it does, we want to make sure we're ready for that. So that's why we included that. Our rationale for including Palmer was the traditional transportation model. We felt a little bit more confident with that, and alignment with our current type 3 big bus transportation provider. And lastly, I'll just mention, we did have a chance to meet with our special education team at the school district, and they reviewed this information and they support the recommendation. Lastly, I kept mentioning they without ever mentioning who they was. Included on the bottom, Rebecca Monens, and our finance and operations coordinator, and Arlen Biting, our CISO transportation representative, played a very key role in this process. So thank you to them for their efforts.
Just a couple comments. First of all, thank you to Bill and the others that he mentioned there. This, some quote type processes or purchasing processes are really straightforward. Some are very complex. This one is incredibly complex. I think you and your team have done a tremendous job. This is an area of transportation really across the state of Minnesota, rife with really serious challenges in providing adequate services, appropriate services, consistently. And so that was also a very important factor in kind of analyzing and the conversations and, do folks have the capacity to do what they say they can do consistently? We've certainly seen some of those challenges, very unfortunately, in our own district, and others are seeing similar challenges. So this is a really, really important process. And again, I just appreciate what Bill and his team have done in terms of this became a real top priority that they put in a lot of time, much more time than in a typical kind of purchase process, to do everything we possibly can to make sure that we're getting this right and that our students will get the kind of service that they deserve.
Hey, Dr. Weber, can I make it more complex?
Yeah, please. Especially if you're asking Bill.
Yes. And certainly appreciate your feedback on this as well. And I know this topic, I mean, we talked about it when we were seeing some of the transportation costs, even with our current relationship with Palmer. Palmer's been an incredible partner. Has the district looked, given those challenges with these services, given the the unique need, what would it take if the district thought you could put your own program together? Was that even a consideration? It would take some time, right, to get a fleet of vehicles and hire the right folks to do that work. Would that even play into some of this, given the unique and specific needs? Or is it best to look at a service provider? And I think, like,
I can answer that. We had some, we've been, our concerns with the current service providers in our state, the kind of the nature of it, we had some preliminary discussions of that nature. I think we feel very good that this is actually a new endeavor for Palmer. We had encouraged them in the past, hey, why don't you look into doing this? You have a tremendous operation. You do put kids in service first. So this was, I believe, their first kind of, hey, we're gonna go out and we're gonna do this type 3. So they put a lot of time and effort and research into that. They've got far more expertise than we do. And I think that's one of the reasons why Palmer, why we feel very good about, what they're doing, the quote they put forward. We were, to be quite frank, we were worried early on about receiving any quotes. We ended up, with about 10, not all of them fully understood what was involved or had the capacity and so, but yeah, so we did look at that. But again, that's an enormous undertaking, but we were just seeing that situation, and it has devolved across the state in the last few years. So that was something that we certainly had given some consideration to. Thankfully, we had a number of folks participate in our quote process, and we have a provider in Palmer who we know, who we've asked those hard questions of, who we believe has the expertise, the skill, the capacity to do a high-quality job in this area.
yeah, and that's fair. I know we work really closely with Southwest Metro and just thinking in terms of that specific need. And at the end of the day, are you in the transportation business or the education business? I'm not trying to make a case.
Oh, no.
Right, that you should start building your own, fleet of.
And I'm not saying there won't come a time in the future, but fortunately, we felt like we had better options.
Very good. Thank you. Appreciate that. Good question.
So I have a question about the supplemental service. First of all, is that included in the projected line there with Palmer? I'm just wondering about how the pay works for them. Are they like on a retainer? Do we pay them per use, or?
It would be a retainer, and it would be per one-way trip. And so I don't know that there's anything in terms of a formal contract. You see in the agenda there's the actual contract with Palmer. I wouldn't recommend engaging in a contract with First Alt. If needed, it would be based off of utilization.
Gotcha. Okay.
And I also think what I hear you asking, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, we've projected, the quantity of services, and that was part of the quote process. So if it was something that Palmer couldn't do, we would be paying First Alt instead of Palmer, in that part of that projection.
That clarifies it. Thank you.
Yeah.
Bill, would this be something then that when Palmer's bus contract comes up that we would consider rolling into our overall contract, or would this always remain a separate contract with Palmer?
That's another great question. I think we'd be open to it. Depending on how things go, I think we're very fortunate, as Dr. Edmund mentioned, that Palmer's interested in going down this road with us. So I think we have every indication that things are going to go great. If that's the case, we would be. If the contracts align and if it makes sense to do so, I think that's probably something we should talk about. And hadn't thought about that before that question.
No, you're just thrilled to bring a good proposal to you tonight and gotten to the next level yet.
I don't know where we're at with Palmer with our regular transportation contract, but this is 2 years, so I would think it would be close to being aligned, maybe a year off.
We're in year 1 of the new contract with Palmer. This year is year 1, so Palmer's year 2 of the big buses will be year 1 of the type 3. So,
so we're a year off.
That's a great question.
Great opportunity.
More questions? This is an action item, so I entertain a motion.
I'll make a motion to approve the type 3 transportation or contract with Palmer Bus.
I'll second. A motion by Aldrich and a second by Brophy. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, Bill. Thank you. Next on our agenda is another action item, item 9.3, approval of curriculum. 9 through 12 social studies, 9 through 12 English language arts, 6 through 8 English language arts options, and K through 5 language comprehension. It's a long list. And here to present are Sarah Werenberg, our Assistant Director of LTE, and Nika Summer, also our Assistant Director of LTE for elementary. So Sarah is secondary. Welcome.
Thank you for having us back here tonight. We are here to, can I go this one first? About those adoptions that Board Chair Mr. Smith just shared with you. And part of our rationale for why we're bringing this to you, we believe as part of learning, teaching, and equity, in order to live out our vision and our mission, changing until all our systems measurably work for each and every student, we need a guaranteed and viable curriculum. And so that is what we are here to present to you tonight, is the recommendation that those teacher teams have made in relation to all of those different content area programs. So I was here prior to tonight with that foundational skills approval, and this is the same process that I brought to you earlier this year. I think if I can remind you of anything about that, this is a multi-year kind of process that many teachers are involved in as we make these recommendations and bring them to you. So just like we did with the foundational skills, Sarah's going to kind of walk you through her secondary process, but our elementary process is basically the exact same. We started with that needs assessment, driven by the new state standards, creating those evaluation rubrics, those guiding principles for us, bringing in a lot of vendors, and then piloting. So I'll turn it over to you.
So rather than belabor the point and go through that iterative process for every single curricula that we are proposing, we just want to talk a little more globally about what that process looked like to show you that we have done due diligence and really included all of the right stakeholders and did a lot of research and constructs as we are making these selections. One thing, as Nika said, that's important to both of our processes is teacher involvement. And before we jump into all of the steps of the articulation team, wanted to call out these 3 opportunities that teachers have had to be involved in the process, one of which is the articulation teams. So that's all volunteer based. The articulation teams make the decisions on the curriculum, the scope and sequence, assessments, pedagogy. Another key function of the articulation teams is that feedback loop. So they're bringing key messages back from our meetings to their teams of teachers, often asking for survey or feedback from their teams, and then bringing it back to articulation meeting spaces where we're making meeting evidence and discussing together. Another opportunity teachers have had to be involved is piloting. So this has been open for any teacher who's wanted to pilot the materials that we are trying. We've had extra volunteers at the secondary, especially with our 6th through 8th ELA material, who have wanted to pilot. We've had volunteer pilots at the elementary. And then another way that we've involved teachers is through curriculum open houses, where all teachers were given an invite to come and peruse materials, to fill out some feedback forms, so that we can get a sense from them on what are they seeing in the physical materials, and then also what do they need from us in terms of implementation.
This just, again, reiterates our elementary teachers involved in our pilot process, and the red names are those that are on our district articulation committee.
All right, so to dive in a little bit of what the process looks like for any one of these given articulation projects is first we're using data to determine priorities. The 3 types of data that we focused on were student outcome data, also student perception data, so getting feedback from students, both qualitative and quantitative, about what worked for them in the previous curriculum and instruction, what changes they would hope to see, and then also getting teacher and admin perception data. How are teachers feeling about the curriculum? What do they want in the curriculum? We looked at patterns. We speculated on the causes of the patterns, and then we reflected. And all of our teams ended up drawing conclusions about major trends and priorities. So here you'll see teachers concluding we need rigor, we need varied assessments, we need a new approach to reading, we need clear purpose in learning, we need to make connections between students' lives and the materials that we're asking them to look at. So the teams then turn those priorities into an evaluation rubric. This is an example from our social studies articulation team. So they organized it into domains. Each domain had various criteria. Each criteria had indicators, and then clearly evident, partially evident, not evident. So the teams used these evaluation rubrics when we were looking at materials, and then again when we had vendors come in to present on the materials, and then again after piloting the materials. So we had 3 different rounds, and teachers were evaluating the materials using these rubrics. So here's an example of how we synthesized all of the data. We looked at 6 different vendors. Everybody had their own rubric, and the data was compiled. We had fun with sheets and numbers. It was great. It was really fun. So this whittled down our options from many, many options. Each gate, it whittled it down more and more and more based on our criteria until we finally landed on the top options to pilot. So these are the different options that were piloted for 9 through 12th grade ELA. Savvis, Mifflin, Hufflin, which is why they changed to HMH. I'm pretty sure it's a long twister. And then Common Lit was 9-12 ELA. Social Studies piloted another Savvis product, the Broad Hill product, and the TCI product. And then middle school ELA, we're piloting currently Savvis, HMH, Common Lit. And then K-5 language comprehension piloted Witten Wisdom, EL Education, and then Arts Centers. So as pilots are wrapping up, we are doing the final evaluation and decision making, looking at 5 data points: the evaluation rubric, a lesson observation, student feedback, teacher feedback, and then references. We always make sure to call other districts who are using the materials to see how their experience has been and what we can learn from them about rollout and implementation and supporting teachers with the change. All right, so now we've got our recommendations for you. So the 9-12 Social Studies team determined that TCI would be the best curriculum for our 10th through 12th grade. TCI curriculum is very inquiry-based, and it prioritizes active and social learning, so that when we are observing a TCI classroom, students are going to be working together to solve problems and make connections about content to their lives. The reason that we're not recommending it in 9 through 12 is because geography, they don't have a 9th grade geography curriculum. Their geography curriculum is catered towards middle school. Minnesota has a pretty unique stance on geography. It's in our 9th grade, but most national vendors don't have a 9th grade option. So for 9th grade, we're hoping to use McGraw-Hill. It's one of the few available resources, but it does have that plethora of digital and online resources teachers can use, especially with language scaffolds and other supports for struggling learners and differentiation. One of my favorite tricks that it has is you can actually toggle back and forth between 2 different lexile ranges. So if you have students that are struggling to read, you can go onto the digital resource. It will switch the entire textbook to a lower reading level so students can have a better shot at access. So it's a neat feature. So that's what we're proposing for 9-12 Social Studies. For 9-12 ELA, we are proposing Common Lit. Common Lit is a rigorous curriculum. It is highly interesting. The students love the concepts that are being discussed. It pursues worthy questions, it puts complex texts in front of students, and it gives teachers a lot of support in how they are teaching and approaching instruction. Their tagline is made by teachers for teachers, also structured, not scripted. So there's plenty of room for flexibility for teachers to put their spin on it, while still maintaining good bones. That's what our teachers are saying. It is good bones. So we're excited about that option. 6-8 English language arts. I'm asking for something a little unorthodox. Early on, we hit a little bit of snag. There's a lot of passion in our 6-8 ELA team. We had a lot of additional teachers who wanted to pilot the materials. It took a little longer to get everybody onboarded to the new resources. So we haven't had a chance to do a good pilot and then evaluate it. We do have our top 3 options: Savvis, HMH, Common Lit. They're all nationally published curricula. They're all green on ed reports. We feel confident that any of them would be a fine choice. We just haven't figured out which one is best for our Shakopee students yet. We're hoping to bring teachers in June to do curriculum writing, which is why I'm asking for this unorthodox blanket approval of all 3. Our final decision would be made on May 20th. That's when we have our meeting scheduled. Worst case scenario, we would come back for approval and postpone curriculum writing, but since June is the time that Shakopee teachers are used to having that opportunity, it would be ideal to keep that curriculum writing time and get that one.
And the K-5 recommendation is Arts and Letters. Arts and Letters is our 3rd and final pilot that we implemented this year. Teachers were really excited about the authentic text. It was very rigorous for students. The conversations students had, the vocabulary they were using, the big ideas they were talking about just blew the teachers away. It will help us kind of really take that core online language and literacy reading training that teachers have been going through and put it into practice. And our teachers saw a lot of those connections when they were implementing the pilot. And an additional positive feature of this curriculum is how it integrates social studies and science content into that ELA block. So we're really excited about that, which is how it always should have been, in my opinion. So I know that that is something that we've already talked about time being short at elementary. That integration is really powerful. And then also the learning environment and enduring knowledge. So really building that background in these content areas prior to when we get to middle and high school. So here is our final proposal, once again, for your review. And we are happy to take, what's next? As Sarah said, June will be a very busy month pending approval. We plan to bring in teachers, we plan to bring in consultants with some of the resources, and really focus on putting all the logistical pieces into play. Everything from the identification of the summative assessments to those formative checks along the way, determining those implementation look-fors that will help us ensure that we have the guaranteed and viable curriculum, and identifying those instructional shifts that we want to see in the classrooms, and then really helping our teachers, helping us create those teacher actions. Quarter 1, what are we going to do? Quarter 2, what are we going to do? So that we have very clear indicators of progress on how it's going all throughout next year. If there's anything you want to say to that? Okay. Questions?
Mr. Chair, if I may. I think you answered the first question, kind of that on-ramp, right? K-5, then leading into the middle level. And it just sounds like arts and letters is the right choice relative to the other providers don't have that rigor or that curriculum. The question really in that 6-8 space, you want to use the right tools and the right curriculum for the best learning. Would there be synergy, since that Common Lit is being used at the 9-12 level, to also use Common Lit at the 6-8 level? Is there any leverage or benefit by staying with a similar curriculum producer as opposed to having really kind of a different product at each level? And I'm asking more so in the context of just if there's efficiency to be gained, certainly not at the sacrifice of the quality of education and the curriculum.
That our middle school pilot teachers have been grappling with that same question. As soon as they heard that the high school had made a commitment to Common Lit, they were asking that same thing.
Yeah.
And it's one of the reasons I'm so glad we are doing such a thorough pilot at the middle school level, because Common Lit has a lot of wonderful things. Our middle schoolers are different than our high schoolers, and they might have different needs. So seeing how the two different curricula actually play out with our kids, I think is very important. So we are asking that, we're exploring it, and we're eager to see what the data says.
And I don't want it to be about the money, right? That's not the intent of the conversation. It's really more if there's efficiencies to be gained.
Yeah.
If there's an equivalent, curriculum out there.
Yeah, the Common Lit is an incredibly strategic learning design 9-12, and then they've got another really strategic learning design 6-8. So it doesn't depend on that 6-12 sequence. I think what they offer in rigor, what we have landed on is there's going to be work to do no matter which curriculum you land on. It's just which work does the team want to invest in. So do we want to invest in the work of adjusting like a Sabbath so that it really aligns well with the scope of learning they're heading to in high school? Or do we want to figure out how to add in all of the bells and whistles and multimedia components to Common Lit that Sabbath provides and Common Lit doesn't? So that's, we can't go wrong either way. There are 3 really remarkable curricula. I think we're just waiting to get that data of how are our kids interacting with each of them and what is going to be a better fit for the needs of that middle school age. Great question.
So I have a question for the arts and letters curriculum for the K-5 ELA program. So will this be all digital? Like, is the platform that you guys are investing in, will it be like you're on your iPad the entire time?
No, and actually that was one of our key look-fors as a team. The teachers really prioritize text in the hands of students. So almost all of the text will be in the hands of the students. How it's structured can vary, so sometimes the text would be one for every partner or one for a small group of students to really focus on that collaborative learning, and other texts will be one per student.
What about, so is learning how to, for example, write an essay going to be part of this curriculum?
Yeah, it's very integrated. So kids are writing, kids are writing daily, K-5. The writing looks different in kindergarten, of course, than it will in 5th grade, but it's very authentic. So we read, we reflect through writing or talking. And then it also builds on those different text types, different genres of writing, so they will have multiple opportunities to write informational texts and arguments and persuasive essays and things like that. And narratives, of course.
And then I saw one of the teacher concerns of the vector-based collective for potential improvements was on ML services and having more resources that could help ML students understand this content even better to with these programs.
I think that was one of the favorite things for Arts and Letters. They have an entire component dedicated to unique learners, whether that's special education students or multilingual learners. And it's centered on kind of pre-teaching. So they're getting a go at the material or the content or the vocabulary before their peers, really setting them up for success to engage in those whole class conversations, and also some reteaching. So things that have been difficult for language learners get an extra focus as well. Those are great questions.
Just, can you help me understand what next year looks like? Exactly who's going to be teaching what? Is it pilot still going or what?
K-5, 6, 12, both?
I guess all would be
Sure.
great.
I can start. I think mine is a little cleaner than K-5
Probably.
at this point. So we'll be implementing all of these curriculum next year. There's a couple, at our senior level, there are a couple classes that are rolling out as we roll in a new scope and sequence. So next year we'll be implementing 9 through 11 social studies, waiting for that 12th grade class to roll out, and then we'll implement that 12th grade course the following year. So for 6A ELA will be full on implementation, and then 9 through 12th grade social studies and ELA will be full on implementation of the purchase resource.
For us, we will focus on our current pilot teams and any of our current district articulation team members that are changing grade levels. They've also been able to decide if they want to keep on it and bring their team on board. We will do a full year of writing. Elementary is getting used to these instructional hubs. So we'll be writing those instructional hubs, we'll be creating those assessments, we'll be fine-tuning the report cards and the parent rubrics and the supports for multilingual learners, special education students, and training our principals on the pedagogical shifts that we are hoping to see with the implementation. So that'll happen all next year. And then we'll roll it out 26, 27 when we have our PD days back after we've completed that redact training. So next year, K-5 will be that full foundational skills implementation. Every teacher, every classroom will do what you previously approved. Next year, we'll fine tune this language comprehension curriculum and then roll it out 26, 27.
I have kind of a non-educator question. What's the difference between the foundational skills curriculum that we approved in March, which was, we had two different sets, the UFLI for K through 2 and the 95 phonics,
yes,
and the K through 5 language comprehension that we're approving tonight?
Great question. So the foundational skills curriculum are the puzzle pieces that we need to teach kids how to read. So ABCs, right? Vowel patterns, fluency, like the pieces, the skills of reading, and then the language comprehension is using all of that and building background knowledge and getting practice with text structures and how do we make meaning while we're reading. So it's kind of those two really critical, important pieces that come together by the time they leave elementary.
So like even in the redact, when we were doing the approval of the literacy curriculum, they have one bucket for foundational skills curriculum, one bucket for knowledge building, and together they call it the comprehensive. So you really need both of those pieces to have a full comprehensive literacy curriculum for kids.
One quick question, the social studies, is that because of the state standards that have changed, is why we're implementing the social studies in the curriculum for next year?
Yeah, and our current textbooks are more modern and accurate.
And I just love the approach, like the peer review, steal from the medical industry, right? The same approach, and I smiled when I looked at the evaluation. We do a lot of that in the technology space, and trying to vet different software. So it was absolutely the bringing in the cohort and kicking the tires and getting the feedback from those who are going to go to use. Just really well thought through.
Any questions?
I'll make a motion to approve the curriculum for the various.
You roll back 2 slides.
Yeah, can you just read all those, Christie?
All of them that are presented, that were presented to us, including the flexibility for the 6-8 ELA to pick the option that is best after the board meeting. So,
It's good summary.
And I'll second, because it's just really easy to say second.
Let's go to a motion by Peterson, a second by Brophy. Further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Next on our agenda is our final action item. Item 9.4, the resolution for membership in the Minnesota State High School League for 2025-26. And Dr. Redmond will present.
Yeah, you'll see it a little bit unorthodox in that part of this document is handwritten. There's a reason for that. Minnesota State High School League has us send in the finished form via DocuSign that is only available after the board approves the resolution, so you get a check at when I really focus some of my best printing in there. But this is very similar to what we do every year. The front page is, we're agreeing to be a member of the Minnesota State High School League and abide by its rules, which is a prerequisite to being a member of the Minnesota State High School League. And then there's a lot of bylaw stuff there. The backside, just moving forward with the persons that went back. I looked at our organization meeting in January. I think I've got everybody captured into the right spots, spaces here. And please take a look at that. If there's something incorrect, we can certainly change that, but we simply ask the board to approve that. And then it's same kind of approval process. I think I go into the DocuSign, sign off on that, and then it goes to the clerk via DocuSign shortly thereafter. Not super exciting after all the other stuff, but necessary.
I will abstain from the vote on this because I'm a high school league board director. I want to make sure that I keep those lines separate, so I will abstain from the vote on this.
Dr. I don't see anything having to do with the fees associated with the membership. The understanding is they're in line with what our expectations would be from a budgetary perspective.
Yeah, and I think the State High School League has gotten kind of back on track with that as we've come out of the pandemic, and even, there have been some funds available at the end of the year, and so it's, that was kind of contentious 2-3 years ago. I think what you're referring to. I'm not aware of any contention in that area. It seems pretty straightforward to participate.
Yeah, I mean, I can just add that, we did have a budget proposal for the next year, which would not be this, no, it would be this. And there has been money going back to school districts as a member credit for the past few years, and it looks like that will continue. I don't know if the amounts are gonna be as great in the out years, on when I'm looking at budget stuff. But hopeful, I mean, a lot of that is all based on, attendance at state tournaments and sponsorships and that sort of thing. So, you know, that really is, it's interesting to watch that ebb and flow of how that money comes in. If you have certain teams that are in the state tournament that are bigger draws, you're gonna see more revenue come in, and if you have teams in the state tournament that maybe are smaller or they don't have maybe the following, revenue can be down a little bit. So it really,
It's variable, yeah.
right, it's really fluctuates, and you can't predict it because you don't know who's gonna be in the state tournament for any given sport.
Yeah, and it was more of the spirit of like, no major surprises, certainly in the course of just as Peterson said, like, it's within guidelines.
We're back into kind of a business as normal or a usual range from year to year. We did have some of that contention not too long ago, but seems to have been resolved, and hopefully moving forward that will continue.
And appreciate the transparency too. So, that's helpful. I'll make a motion, oh, I'm sorry, is there another question? Make a motion to approve as presented.
Second.
Motion by Brophy and a second by Eldridge. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries 6-0. That concludes our action items for this evening. Next are two information items. Item 10.1, community conversation participation data. And Tiffany Olson, our Director of Communications and Strategic Development, will present.
Thank you, Chair Smith. This is a very brief item, just to ensure everyone is still remembering that we do have our community conversation and survey period open right now that runs through May 23rd. There's various spots on our website, social media items that have been shared with families and community members. Definitely applaud the city of Shakopee and the Shakopee Chamber for also working with us to share that information, as well as Mikasa and our CFLs. Verbally, I can share right now, just to give you a few tidbits, we did exceed our participation rate at this time. So we are just shy of 1,400 that have participated. 1,000 was our goal. We were around that 900 mark last year. So good engagement. The biggest growth has been in that 6th through 8th category. Those that their youngest child is in grades 6th through 8th, and a small peak in those that do not have a child in the district. So that could be a taxpayer, staff member, or student are the three areas that they could be categorized in there. A few other snapshots too is on average about 25 thoughts are being rated per participant, which is also an increase. We are on that average around 15 or so, which you could imply there's greater engagement of what's going on with that open-ended question. And we still have that like roughly 50% mark of those that take the survey, the closed-ended questions versus open-ended. So again, various forms of participation. We have a lot of folks that are engaging. We're above where we're at previously, and we do have a few pushes coming this week to really hopefully maybe even exceed that 1,000 and go up higher to the 2. But wanted to make sure you folks were aware, and I'm happy to answer any other questions, but we are on track for the timeline that was shared, which was June. You'll be presented with that information once it closes on the 23rd.
I suppose you can't really share any preliminary findings because it would potentially taint the survey that's still open.
That is correct, Chair Smith.
And any idea like what's driving the additional participation? I mean, that's wonderful. Did we have a different approach in terms of social media or how the word was getting out?
It'd be hard for me to speculate exactly. What I can say is that each year we do get really good feedback, whether it's from students like Shania, those in the community, others that are just saying, hey, if we send out an audio call and actually include the survey links in a text message, people will be more apt to do stuff. So there's little tweaks we've made here and there, but in general, it has been the same methods that we've used in the past few years. So a few tweaks here and there, but overall, better community engagement.
Great. That's encouraging.
Any other questions? Thank you, Tiffany.
Thank you.
Next is item 10.2, a district financial update, and Dr. Revnan will present.
Chair Smith and members of the board. A continuation of where we've been and trying to, as you give feedback, that actually, and I'll kind of point out, we've added some stuff in terms of operating levy and comparable districts that I know Tim specifically asked some questions about that at our last meeting. And then towards the end, we begin to delve, kind of taking even, there's a diagram of, how our general fund breaks down by category and, as a service organization, if you're, talking about budget cuts, how that usually works. And again, trying to build off of, I know I shared some things in the wrap as well, and trying to find that kind of sweet spot as we continue down this journey of providing information and, in a timely and useful, and try not to be overwhelming, but yet give you a sufficient amount of information. Again, some important decisions, in particular really targeting the 26-27 school year, and also some thought to the years that follow. The context, we've shared a lot of this. I just saw one of our neighboring districts, in writing, I think it was today, kind of a community notice that they made cuts for this school year. But they're making another, I think it was 4.1 million for next school year, and expect to make another 4.1 million the year that follows. But across the state, many school districts are facing what Bill talked about, those financial headwinds. We have a budget that is balanced for next school year, the 25-26 school year, but it is becoming structurally imbalanced, and so 26-27 certainly need to take action, which we've been talking about. This has been kind of a key component of these presentations, and this is just showing the revenue, and we've used this during negotiations. We've used it part of the leadership team, but this is that additional revenue comparison in the state of Minnesota when you get above and beyond the general allocation through the per pupil fund. Kind of two primary ways of adding revenue in the general fund. One is via the operating levy, taxpayer approved. The other would be through quality compensation or QComp. And on this, you'll notice this is where, compared to the districts that we compare ourselves to, those other 11 comparison districts, where we stand, you see Shakopee, that light blue line. And I would point out, if we look at operating revenue, just a shade under 8 million less per year that we have to spend on providing services than does Burnsville. And again, this diagram, if you look at the red line towards the top of this table, we've given everybody the exact same number of students as Shakopee has, so that we truly are comparing apples to apples in terms of if you were, if you had this additional revenue. And then if, to Burnsville again, if you include QComp, they have almost $10 million per year that they're spending to provide services than we are in our school district, just for comparison. I think the question, or part of the conversation last time, kind of went back to, hey, do you remember when we didn't have a levy? And so that's this slide. This is prior to the voters approving an operating levy in our school district in November 2021. And you'll see there, to use that same comparison, our difference between us and Burnsville, the total, almost $21 million less every year to provide those same services. So the operating levy has cut that in half. maybe a hair more than in half. So. And then I think this is where the questions were going as well. Kind of the what if. We talk about the revenue side of this equation. What if an operating levy were on the ballot this November for $606 per pupil, that tax neutral level where 5.1 million is coming off the tax rolls for our citizens, and form of construction debt ending in calendar year 2026, being switched over to 4.8 million in operating levy revenue. And you will see that does improve the standing of Shakopee schools. And then to kind of continue this theme, the difference between Shakopee and Burnsville overall would be Shakopee would have about $5 million less annually to provide the services than does a Burnsville. And then kind of going back, I'm not gonna, again, interrupt at any time or ask questions and kind of as we move through this, but going back to this anchor spreadsheet, which again is not a spreadsheet that ties out, but trying to give people the ability to track our typical kind of categories of revenues, where they come from over a period of time, then also our enrollment, our teacher employment, and then our expenditures broken out, via the UFARs or Minnesota Department of Education codes on the bottom, so you can kind of track and get a handle on those changes over time. And I've shared this exact slide before. The state has some things built in terms of school funding for school districts where they have declining enrollment, but nowhere near enough to hold the district harmless, if you will. And so for us, that the impact of our declining enrollment between fiscal 21 and fiscal 25 is we have $8.2 million less to work with. We certainly have fewer students, but trying to cover that gap is certainly a challenge. And then we've talked a lot about inflation. I won't go through this table again, and we've talked about the growing gap between 2021 and 2025. You'll notice the formula allowance, what we get is that orange dotted line, and had it kept pace with the rate of inflation would be that blue line, and you see that gap between what we actually get and what we would get if per pupil funding had kept pace with the rate of inflation. And right now that gap, just the change in the gap between fiscal 21 and fiscal 25, the last 4 years, that gap grew from $569 per pupil to $1,364, or the gap increased by $795 per pupil, putting that into a Shakopee Public Schools district-wide number, meaning that had our per pupil funding kept pace with the rate of inflation, we would be receiving $6.6 million more in revenue this school year. If we were just equal and had our funding, our per pupil funding kept pace with inflation. And again, we live in the real world. We're a service provider. Primarily, we hire people. Their cost of living goes up in their lives. Their health costs and their living costs by typically the rate of inflation. So that is why that marker is used. Again, kept this anchor spreadsheet just to be able to refer back to that. We look at the revenue side. We've been through these. They're there. Happy to pick that apart, but not gonna go through all of these pieces. We've got the projected revenues, trying to take the budget work that Bill Manazzi and his team have done and carry it out through fiscal 28. So we kind of bounce from actual revenues, then to projected, then we add the projected years in. We do the same with actual expenditures, and then we try to carry that out through Bill's budget work through fiscal 28. We have projected expenditures, and then we go back to the anchor spreadsheet. And then getting into kind of the school board focus and discussion. I've said this a few times already, but in terms of school funding in the state of Minnesota, there really are 3 options. If you have expenditures that are greater than your revenues, which is our situation in the 26-27 school year, those options, of course, are to cut your expenditures, budget cuts, or increase your revenues. or a combination of budget cuts, and increasing revenues. When we talk about budget cuts, and we've gone through this part, we've begun to look at those things. We always try to look at efficiency and effectiveness. We've added, Bill Manazzi and his team brought that Schoolie Mitchell project into our district a few months ago, where we've got outside folks taking a look at how we do business and trying to find cost savings. And we'll, more reports on that. We've got other things as we move forward. And then, our plan that, just kind of looking at things and adjusting for both enrollment and kind of what I think would be, with the leadership team, with Bill, kind of that minimum in terms of permanent budget cuts would be $3 million for the 26-27 school year. And then this is the slide I was referring to. This is this year's pie graph. You have in Bill's proposed budget one for next year. Pretty similar in terms of how the general fund expenditures get divvied up. Really, it's that last paragraph, if you will, where it says 90% of our general fund expenditures go to purchasing services, salary and benefits, or it says wages and benefits on here. Less than 10% of our general fund expenditures go to supplies and equipment. And again, I think it's human nature. We're in a service business. When we start talking about budget cuts, and I've watched this over my time in education, is people always try to go to places outside of people and, what about the thermostat? What about fees? What about those? Absolutely, you should do that and look at that, and we will do that. That doesn't come anywhere close to 4.8 million or more in budget cuts, and we continually do that. It ultimately comes down to, because we provide services, that we're going to provide, if you make budget cuts, we're going to provide less in the forms of services, meaning fewer employees doing that work or fewer programs or some combination of both. Yeah.
So kind of following with that, so the bulk of the cuts have to be people. So then the usual common thing, and I was probably guilty of this too before I looked into running for school board, is just your instinct is to say, well, cut everybody but teachers first. And that seems to be a real common take. And so I don't know if you want to speak to that, but I mean, when our levy failed, operating levy that was on the ballot in 2020 failed, we made, was it $3 or $4 million in cuts which were primarily admin related. And so I'm seeing that, because this has been put out in the public now, and I've been seeing some feedback, and it's similar feedback to probably something I felt as well 10 years ago, that, oh, of course, there must be admin you can cut.
We already took it out of the couch cushions in 2020, right? We didn't get another couch.
Well,
sorry, Dr.
No, you both hit on, again, I've been doing this work for a long time. I would say it might be a tie or the second place that people go to. Well, cut administrators. And certainly, this is what I shared in the weekly update, the wrap last week, where we went through a series of budget cuts, an attempted operating levy the voters didn't approve, then one that was after we had made a total of about $7.5 million in budget cuts. And if you remember, we restored about $3.5 million in budget cuts. I'm kind of rounding the numbers, meaning we made $4 million in permanent budget cuts back in that time period. And again, we took a long, hard look and really cognizant of what we brought back, what we didn't bring back, and what were permanent, and certainly an outsized, just in terms of the proportion it makes up in the district, an outsized proportion of that would have been administrative things further away from the classroom. But again, to make $4.8 million in budget cuts, and not include the largest groups of people in the school district, which are teachers, which make up, roughly 60% of the budget, is very, very challenging, and probably would lead to a very inefficient and ineffective sort of organization, You think of all the work that the folks do who are supporting the teachers, supporting the support staff. You know, we've talked a number of times about Bill Manazzi and the finance team, and you know, they continue to be, you know, called out for doing good work in terms of the audit, in terms of human resources, in terms of all the different state mandates and rules and things that we have to follow, and having principals that understand, you know, the changes to statute and how to interact with students and make sure we get, you know, transcripts done in time and all of that work. You know, ultimately, I look at my job and, you know, I use Jim and I, you've probably seen us with that inverted pyramid, where we're the little dots on the bottom of that. Ultimately, we're supporting the work that's about student learning. But, you know, the pyramid's much narrower at the bottom. It's 2 dots and then it really widens out. But I also believe that you have to have good support to have good results in the classroom. Certainly, those closest to that, the #1 impact on student learning is high quality teachers and high quality instruction. You know, next it's the other layers of support, including principals. But all those pieces, you know, make a school district function. And the other piece, I think when we still do some of the comparisons to other districts, they have a lot of positions we don't have in their district offices, some of them. And, you know, so we try to run lean. And again, I think when we look at budget cuts going down that road, typically it needs to be somewhat proportional across the district. And I'm not saying that that means every category has to be equal, but in order to do it without just totally derailing effectiveness and efficiency, that's typically how it's done. So.
And Dr. River, I think that dovetails really well into that 85% kind of rule that we were trying to track for. That is 85% of the revenue are services that directly impacts the student classroom. And if you use that as the basis, right, like, you're not going to move the needle by trying to focus on cutting within the 15% bucket. And if we go back to the anchor spreadsheet, so I was trying to do the rough math in my head, but as a percentage of those line items, you know, any material cut would have to impact a classroom, right?
Yeah, and I appreciate, Brent, we use that kind of 85-15. We found that was in a way oversimplified because some stuff needed to be pulled out of there, which is what Bill has done, where you can skew those numbers by you're doing some major LTFM projects. Right. And then all of a sudden it's like, well, wait a second, that, you know, and so he tried to pull some of those so that what we have in the expenditures part, we believe is an improvement on this anchor spreadsheet so that you can see kind of the comparable percentages of what are typical ongoing expenditures, primarily the services being provided by all the different people across the district.
Well, and Chair Smith brought up a really good point. The cuts that were made in 2020, it's not as though those dollars were never added back, right? They were permanent cuts.
Correct.
So there isn't an additional $2 or $3 million just hanging out there as opportunistic. So I think it's just a really good point.
No, and I think in listening to Bill Manazzi earlier, there was some one-time assigned or other money that was targeted, and that allows us to do some things next school year, be balanced. It allows us to continue to do that really, really important curriculum. We just approved, new curricula, to continue to do that, continue to implement the READ Act, that training, continue to do those things as well as we can. And then obviously in 26, 27, we simply do not have the capacity to continue to do that at that level. So.
Now, I know that, oh, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Sorry.
I get my word because I wasn't at the last meeting, so here come all my questions. I just want to piggyback off of what Jeff said, because that is something that is heard in every district about administration. Well, just cut administration. Administration makes too much money. But if you go back to the shared spreadsheet or whatever we call that, anchor sheet, there we go. If you look at our administrative costs, and even with the projections out to 28, it has the smallest percent increase. And it also has the smallest percentage of overall change in the past 7 years, even with the projections. So, you know, we can cut all the administration, so we can get rid of all the principals, we can get rid of a superintendent, which you need to have, I think that's a state statute. So then what? Then we have chaos in our schools because we have nobody managing our schools. And it's, you know, the people that are saying that are the same people that were saying it a few years ago when we were talking about an operating levy and had one fail and then the next year's success. So I just think that it continues. I just think that there's part of still some healing in the community that people need to have from a previous superintendent. I still think there's some of that. But I think it's also understanding what is part of every single line item there under expenditures. You know, who would be qualified, or who would be under district support services. We know elementary and secondary regular instruction. We know that's our teachers. Vocational ed, that again would be teacher-based. Special education would be teacher-based. So I think it's really important to call out who are part of those buckets, because when you look at those percentage changes, that's where it's really eye-opening, in my opinion, of where our money is really being spent. The administration line looks high, but it really isn't in comparison to all the other expenditure lines that are up there.
And Bill Menazzi went to watch his son play baseball, and I told him, "Oh, you're good. Nobody's going to ask a question." Built into this spreadsheet, he does have tabs that will open to those things, so we will plan on opening those up at our June 4th special board meeting.
So one thing that is in the audit report that we receive every year is it shows us compared to other districts on administrative costs and everything. And for the last several years, Shakopee, when it comes to administration, is 1 to 2, if not more percent lower than the average Twin Cities school district, the average state school district. So yeah, 5 years ago, 6 years ago, when we made those cuts, and they were permanent, a lot of that was in those administrative, and what we brought back was teachers and counselors and things that were closest to the students. You know, there has to be efficiencies found, but Dr. Redmond brought up the finance department. The audit also says for every year that I've been on the board, they need one more person to be compliant. They would hire people, we don't need to get into that. I get the fact that nobody wants to lose teachers. Nobody wants to say if we have to, we're just going to get rid of teachers. Yeah, it's got to be a broad based cut. It's going to hurt here and there. Unfortunately, that's just reality.
And I really question, I guess question probably isn't the right word, but more concern around an additional $3 million in budget cuts on top of the $4.5 million that we made not too terribly long ago, because where are we going to find an additional $3 million in budget cuts? I mean, a little bit here and there, you know, smaller dollar amounts, but it takes a whole lot to make up $3 million.
We have some ideas on that. Part of that is enrollment adjustments are added in there, so that is part of that we continue to have declining enrollment. Some other parts of that are, as we've begun to prepare for this and look at this, we've kind of looked at, you know, what parts of our budget, and I'm talking more at the district level in terms of how we operate programs and do that, have adjusted for the decline in enrollment, because some kind of do that automatically, some, you know, need manual kind of, manipulation and to get that and understand that. And others, to be, quite frank, to use that finance department again, if you have 8,000 students or you have 7,000 students or, and a slight difference in employees, the jobs and the responsibilities in terms of payroll and doing the accounting don't change a lot in terms of it's, hard to reduce, a percentage of something. A lot of that remains whether you have that number. Now, if you went down to 2,000 students, yeah, it might be different. So that's part of that challenge. We've been looking at that. We feel confident that we can do that. And again, there is no, I think the other big part, and there is no way to make a reduction of services, where you are, having fewer people working for you than you were previously, to do that without pain. That has some pain. And again, I'm not trying to, talk out of kind of both sides of my mouth, because I also believe, and I think we did this stuff, you can do this well or professionally or in a thoughtful manner. And I think we did a good job of that in that kind of the 2020 through 2022 era. And I think it's important to do that. And it's also important to, yes, can you do everything after you cut people and you cut some programs and you increase class sizes and do that? Can you do everything you could do previously? No. But it's also true that you need to continue to work hard, put students first, serving the community as a top priority, and continue to do the best that you can, even though, the context, the situation changes. And so I think they're complex, they're challenging discussions, they're important discussions. There are no, there are no easy answers. If there were, we'd already be doing them. The answers all require some thought, some planning, some challenges, and there's trade-offs. So,
Dr. Rogan, and I think the slides you put together, the comparable district comparison using the same population of students, super compelling, just to illustrate what I will say the efficiency that Shakopee has been demonstrating in terms of being able to provide the services we have with significantly less revenue. And then my kind of follow-up question there, we're talking about the potential of having the $606 tax neutral, because we've got the bonds rolling off, adding the 606, again, kind of net neutral. What happens if we look at it and say, let's levy to the max of the 2397, or whatever the limit is it 2,400 per student, just to see what that would look like, right? Is that?
I think I skipped over it accidentally earlier.
I don't remember
Or did
some
we do
of it
this?
early. I don't remember if we saw, if we wanted to full on. Okay. Forgive me if I missed that one. It's still, I mean, even if we were to levy the max, we're still less because of the QCOM factor, right?
Although if they implement the governor's budget proposal and cut QCOM to
Then
zero.
we're all even, right? Then
we get-
they're in
yeah.
our boat, right?
And you will notice the oddity that some districts are over the cap that was established in kind of a, grandparenting in, if you will.
Forgive me if I missed this one, but yeah.
Yeah, you did not show this particular one. We
No, I know it was in here and I kind of hesitated what.
So that directly
That
addresses
was my
your
question.
Got it.
Burnsville's still 2.5 million more per year, but it's much closer, and 2 million of that is QCOM, so.
And if we're going to be transparent, go back to the community and say, hey, what's it going to take to minimize impact in the classroom? It would be, this would be the ask. And is it a question one, question two kind of thing? We can speculate all night long, but that is a picture that at least lessens the impact if we're doing both revenue increase and being really thoughtful about making some cuts to get us back to as whole as we can be for keep providing those services. I think that would be the call it best case scenario. He says with confidence. I don't know.
How much revenue has Shakopee lost on QCOM?
$16 million.
That's kind of a figure.
You know, one other thing that I think would be good information to have, because I do hear this on occasion, and I heard it with the last time that we had the levy approved, we didn't touch any athletic programs. People, that's the first thing they go to, why don't you just cut a sport, cut 2 sports, okay? How much do we really spend on athletics and activities in Shakopee schools? Because I think it would shock people how little those programs do cost us compared to what we have to cut. It's a very small percentage.
No, that's great insight, and that's something I think we'll definitely bring that June 4th special board meeting. Yeah, and I think some of that is we hear the incredible amount spent at Division I college athletics, and for us, athletics and activities, and that is really a continuation of the classroom outside of that, and certainly we'll give you, we'll give you that total expenditure. And
I mean, I'm not advocating for that.
no, I didn't hear that. I was more, what do we spend on it?
Exactly, and I think that would be interesting, that item that the community has been someone asking for. And I can tell you that one of the last conversations I was in with other school board members across the state about budget cuts, some of the feedback was, we're tired of cutting in the classroom. Why don't we ever cut sports or activities? Because shouldn't we be focusing on educating and not on athletics and activities? And I would argue against that, because there's a lot of educational opportunities that are learned via participating in a sport, collaboration, teamwork, that sort of thing. It's not just physical activity. There's a lot of life lessons that can be learned through athletics and activities, but schools and school board members are looking at what if we have to start reducing more and more based on what we're seeing with numbers at the Capitol. Something I mean, at some point, athletics are going to be hit. At some point.
And there is the risk of, when you start cutting athletics and activities, that if a neighboring district has that activity or athletic program, they're going to transfer their students, which then causes a loss of revenue, and it's just, you know.
Then you get Title IX, which would be compliant with Title IX, and that whole shebang.
Quality of our overall product, to use a business term, goes down, and that's correct. Chad?
So I think just having a detailed budget picture in layman's terms makes, like to your point, Christy, makes that very clear. You cannot make up a $9 million budget shortfall by cutting a $200,000 expense, you know? And so you can be like, to the, you know, the show me crowd, you can show them like, okay, here's the list, what do we cut? And the big number, you know, big numbers are hard cuts to swallow. And there's some small numbers that, yeah, we could cut, and you'll hate that, and it won't solve the problem.
I think I appreciate the fact the board approved the special meeting for June 4th, sorry. At the last meeting, I brought that to Mike's attention and Tiffany's, because looking at how did we communicate previously with our levies, it's always been after the fact with the community. But let's get their feedback before we make any decisions on what we're going to do. We'll give them an opportunity in a public setting to come and talk to the board as a one-way communication. We, you know, not that we're going to enter any discussions with them, but give us your feedback. Tell us what we should do. So hopefully we will get that interaction, because to be honest, I would rather them come to the board meeting and tell us exactly how they're feeling about decisions that have to be made before we make them, versus reading it online. Send me an email, come to our meeting. But I mean, the value of that is way more to me than reading it online.
Slightly, I mean, it's related. So we have Hazel Reinhardt doing the enrollment study. Is she gonna come and present it to us? Do we get to meet her and ask her?
Yeah, she came and presented it personally, did it before, so typically she does that. We're trying to get her set up for that, if she's done the June 9th and again.
So that'll be done by June 9th, okay.
Well,
That's coming.
we are trying, that's a really aggressive timeline. I
Yeah.
know, again, Bill is giving her whatever information. The good news, and again, interesting, we contracted with Hazel and 2 days later, she's in the Star Tribune as
Yeah, well,
kind
that's.
of the state guru on enrollment, which is
That's
good.
why I wanted to bring that up,
Yeah.
because there was that article in the Star Tribune within like the last 10 days where she was interviewed, and I remember a figure from that article that kind of stuck with me was, decreasing enrollment averages statewide 5%, but so statewide decrease, but that varies greatly by district to district, because we're down like, 9% across several years.
One side is up.
And some districts are up because what is it, like Woodbury, they've got like a charter school that's very popular too. That's in a separate article that was today or yesterday. But the reason I bring all that up is, we're assuming decreased enrollment due to lower birth rates, but there's other possibilities too that I'm hoping to get more clarity on. For if people are enrolling outside the district for whatever reason, our product isn't as attractive for some reason. I'd like to get some insight on that, and it'd be nice to have that sooner rather than later. But then the question I would ask Hazel is, okay, for people who are enrolling outside the district, that becomes kind of a recruiting issue. Does she have any insight into how we can change that? Because that goes back to I'm jumping all around, but, so the earlier question is, how do we balance the budget? Okay, well, we increase revenue or we make budget cuts. One way to increase revenue is to increase enrollment, right? How do we do that? Do we have any control over that? And whether it's recruiting or addressing concerns of people who, for whatever reason, are enrolling their kids elsewhere, and what can we do about that?
Can you repeat that question? I'm kidding. No, I've got the gist of it, and Hazel is scientist, demographer, not marketer, and again, I was gonna kind of conclude that having her, she's done 3 previous studies in Shakopee, that helps her to turn things around more quickly. She will tell you what is and what kind of gets projected out. We are doing some work internally. Katie Ross, our new Mars coordinator, our data person input, has been working with Jim and Tiffany and I, and is gonna work some with Bill, and we are digging through some of that data. The number one driving factor has been declining birth rates, period, and that's a Scott County thing, it's across the state, it's across the nation. There are other factors, and we're trying to see if they've accelerated. The pandemic makes it interesting, but charter schools have grown, in our area. That is also an option for students, where we have students who have, left us for that, although sometimes they come back and then sometimes they leave again. There is a slight increase in homeschool, and then we are looking at all of those other things, and we just met with her again the end of last week to try to go, all right, how do we take all this data, make it longitudinal, and pull it, and make sure we're running the same queries, so we're getting the same data set, and we're very close to having that, and we want you to have that, and we've done, I think we've done some general presentations. We want to have more substance, so we are working on that to be able to do that. I think the other point that got mentioned, and I found it fascinating. My son played college soccer at UW Oshkosh, and somebody kind of talked about school choice or whatever. And fortunate for him, it was after his senior year, and he had a wonderful experience there, educationally playing soccer. They decided the way to solve their one of the budget challenges was, well, we're going to cut the men's soccer program. So you had 25 athletes. Just say they were paying 10 grand a year in tuition for round numbers. And they thought, all right, we're going to cut this program. It's going to save the $180,000 in expenses. Well, I'm pretty sure none of those 25 would have enrolled there. I know my son wouldn't have, and so you would have had in that case, and it's a different deal, but 25 fewer students at $10,000 a year. So I was perplexed by that, because you could really see the math. They had boiled it down. I'm like, that's not going to save you money. And so I think, kind of the point being made, why do people choose to come? What moves people? How some things we try to compare apples to apples, and even like activities versus the classroom. We do make cuts in activities, and it's, fewer coaches per number of athletes and some of those pieces as well, which is what we tend to do in the classroom. It's fewer adults with more students. And so, but, when you start wiping pieces out, and that goes both ways. That's, in academics, we did make some changes to our college and the schools courses and some things. I think those, have a different impact than when we're increasing class sizes. And similarly, although it's easier to restart that, if you cut an activity for students, some are easier to restart than others, and some will. I can't remember who said it, some will, I've got other options now to go to other school districts. And so it is a different, it's a different world in terms of mobility and options for students. And we have seen some real positive trends, and again, it's more anecdotal, where we have had students move in from places they never moved in before, for the academies of Shakopee, for other things. So, but trying to quantify that, trying to do that becomes tricky, but we are doing that work, so.
So, having the ability or the opportunity to look through our budgets and being part of the finance, having presentations from Bill and you, Dr. forgive me if I'm wrong, or correct me if I'm wrong on this, but I'm just looking at like big picture wise. This is like a tiger in the weeds. This isn't just all of a sudden next year we're going to be $7 to $9 million, or 2 years from now, $7 to $9 million. With a challenge here. This year, if I remember right from Bill's presentation, we had some one-time revenues from like the sale of the school that kind of patched us over. That if you didn't have that, we'd maybe be running $1 million or $2 million deficit. Now next year, we just talked about next year's budget. Even if you take out the one-time expenditures in curriculum, we're probably $4 or $5 million short. Joe, you know what that chart looks like, right?
Yes.
The 3 to 5 to 7 is clearly where we're going here, essentially. And so, yeah, I don't see any cuts or any ways to not diminish our product of our schools. And I even love how our meetings are constructed. You've got all the cool things that our schools are doing to start off with, and then we get to see that. And then we got to sit here and talk about how do we keep that, or what does it take to do that, and going from 3 to 5 to $7 to $9 million in losses without making really drastic cuts to our product, essentially, and our students' experience. I don't see any other solutions, at least not any reasonable ones.
No, that, I think what you shared is spot on. It's, and partly, and again, this isn't the only graph, but there's a structural imbalance in terms of state funding. I mean, and I think this graph shows that. Inflation's real, and as a school district means, for buying food, we're, purchasing transportation, we're purchasing, through salary and wages, those services, they cost more in the real world. And it, in my mind, that those two lines, if you had a structural balance in your state funding for public schools, they would just tend to stay the same, or we don't have that. It's been a challenge, and it's not a new challenge. It kind of varies from time to time, but really over 30 years, it's a tricky challenge. We try to find efficiencies. We try to continue to be effective. Both of them, I'm looking at, Jim and I both, we spent some time in a school district that they made deep budget cuts for the better part of a decade, and then finally passed a smaller operating levy. But the stuff on that list, they blown by. I mean, it wasn't which activity to cut, it was how many of these activities are you cutting for next year? And then it would repeat itself. And I think what I learned is, that's a harsh reality, but also how you discuss these things, how you organize, it's really important. But there's no secret sauce, there's no mystery to this. you know, less revenue in terms of real buying power is a real challenge for public schools, and we're seeing that across the state.
Well, and it's rhetorical, but name another industry that doesn't adjust for inflation. Name another industry that has a cap on revenue. But like, it's just, and to try to operate in those parameters. Again, it's speculative, you know, but.
Yeah, and there are industries where you can increase output and efficiency and do that and generate more revenue. You know, but not in a service, you know, in a service, we can get more efficient, we try to do that and be more effective.
Your primary driver is enrollment, and if your primary driver is on a declining basis, and your hands are tied.
And even if our enrollment were steady, we would still have a
be a
challenge
gap.
with the state funding. I believe Wayzata is, I don't know if they're not on our list, but they were making budget cuts. Somebody said their enrollment had grown.
Because they're looking at adding schools.
Yeah.
Another elementary and another middle school.
Which, while cutting a budget in the operating side, you know, we need more space for kids.
The logistics of this though is still always gonna be a challenge, right? Asking for a third levy in a 5-year period or whatever. We're gonna have to explain this to everybody and see it, right? And to Mr. Brophy's point earlier, I'd almost rather we have the opportunity to go for it all and be done with these levies and just work with that as our product. Obviously, you might have to have a one or the two question deal as we've done in the past, but a $7 or $9 million gap, I mean, we could look at it in a couple different ways, but I just would hate to have to do this again in 2 or 3 years, is kind of my whole point to that. If the $4 million or $5 million proposal doesn't quite get us there, why are we even proposing it? You know, like, we need to, there's certain outcomes that are very cool, I understand that, and we're gonna get some information on plans of those, but.
I mean, I think we can go for gold and go to the cap, but I still am very concerned about 3-4 years from now that it's, again, we're gonna be back in the same spot. Because in the last meeting I was at, so previous to a couple weeks ago, my concern was that it wasn't even gonna be enough to get us very far. It was a Band-Aid fix, I think is what Joe called it.
Well, yes.
And that's at the cap, so then what?
It's unassigned fund balance.
That's why so many districts are cutting, because they're already at that cap. They can't go out there. They're out of choices, they're out of options.
Even if they're at the
Exactly.
max.
They're maxed at the amount of revenue they can levy.
Right.
And there's no other alternative than to.
Unless the state raises the
Unless the
cap.
state jumps in and changes either the 2% or does an inflationary adjustment.
If it doesn't pass, it'll be our only option.
Correct.
Because the problem is even if they're at the max, when you're getting 2 to 3% from the state and you're spending 5% more a year, it's just, the math just doesn't work. It's just, you're basically, every year you have to cut something to make that 5% go down to 3%, because it's just, that's math, unfortunately.
Help me understand this piece of it, because I've been trying to think through this in my head. The last time we went out for a levy, a lot of it was in regards to teacher compensation and increasing our teacher compensation to bring them up to the middle, as close to the middle as we can get, and bring back all the cuts. This doesn't do that. This additional revenue is really filling the gap of where we're short, and not a whole lot more than that. Is that correct?
I think in general, it's continuing the same level of services, and Bill has also, he hasn't built in extravagant increases, but trying to build in reasonable increases for that. You know, the anchor chart, showed, the movement there. We did spend that money exactly the way we said we would, trying to move teachers and support staff towards the middle, which is also, an important piece too. We want high quality people in front of our kids, working with our kids, and to try to compensate them fairly. But Yeah, I think that's why, maybe the bigger difference, and not that there weren't other school districts kind of going back into 2020 that didn't have financial headwinds, to borrow Bill's phrase again. And our situation was in a way very unique then. We were the only one without a voter-approved operating levy in the entire metro area. And you could see, to somebody's point, we were doing the best we could to try to do what we could with less revenue. I think what we're seeing now is kind of the structural challenges at a state level of, we're seeing, well, many school districts, nearly all, are facing those same financial headwinds where, kind of to Joe's picture, a 2.74% on the per pupil formula this year, which is tied to inflation. But the question is, now we got good news from our health insurance. Other districts have a 12, 14, 18% increase in health insurance. So 2.74% doesn't get you that far with salary and health insurance. So I think we're seeing that ongoing, what I always talk about is, teaching economics. There's a structural imbalance at the state level in terms of revenues and expenditures, for public schools. And we are not alone, and in some ways, we're entering this fray later than many of our peers in the area, and some of that is, it is due to the one-time money, it is due to being very conservative with some of the budgets over the last couple of years and trying to move forward. But you can only, we're in that situation where the 26-27 school year, there's no way to dodge that.
And I think clarity around that message of where this funding would go.
Yeah.
Because that was a big part of the messaging a few years ago.
Yeah, very much so.
Was teacher compensation, and I don't really feel like that is the primary driver with this.
You could say the primary driver is not having to cut teachers.
Right.
Yeah, trying to keep class sizes the same,
Class
or
sizes,
to increase them by a smaller amount than you might otherwise have to. And we've been doing that math behind the scenes, and again, please reach out. I've tried to take notes as we do this. If there are things that Bill and I, we'd like to accommodate. If you think there's some things in that June 4th presentation, I've got some of the notes already, but other pieces, and again, we still have to do it in a timely manner, but trying to, share information or be prepared to answer different questions. We certainly want you to have the information that you need and as decision makers, but we also, again, we want to do this, eyes wide open in front of our community. We're a public entity. All of our data is public in terms of our finances. We're happy to share that, happy to help people understand where we're at. And we've done that. We do that every month, just routinely, with Bill and his budgets, and certainly to point out, there are no easy solutions. There are no pain-free solutions. And it's a challenge that, certainly being faced by many other school districts.
There will be a lot of operating levies on the ballot in November.
Possibly.
A lot of districts.
Yeah, absolutely. Although some of those that are at the cap.
Right.
That'd be one thing that'd be nice to see is a list of schools that are already capped and maybe a list of schools that are significantly less levy just at some point in time.
Yeah, and we can do that. And I was just.
Your communities to them.
Yeah.
Which ones would you rather?
Yeah, and off the, Edina is they're very close to the cap. The others above them, Hopkins, Burnsville, Minnetonka are all at the cap. They've been grandparented in above the cap at an old number.
That would pretty much be all metro area, like outer state, probably not to mention that, right?
We can find a list. We've got that somewhere, and it's easier for me to get the metro ones through AMSD. But there's lists where they do those runs, and I don't know.
I wouldn't say that.
Yeah, there's some smaller districts that have via operating levy or other ways in greater Minnesota have supported their schools that way. Yeah. Yeah, we don't have time to get into the whole fairness or lack of fairness in terms of different communities and how the referendum market value gets made up and what proportion is commercial industrial and what proportion is residential and how the state equalizes some of that in tiers, but, you know, very, very different. And, you know, I think that in some ways, you know, Shakopee has a pretty strong commercial industrial base too, which, you know, because raising the same amount of money in two different school districts, even if everything else were exactly the same, the makeup of your tax base, your tax community changes how hard or how easy it is in terms of the hit on residential taxpayers. It's not uniform.
If you look at that chart, if this is what was decided or voted on by if that was the decision or direction that we went with the $906 additional, 196, which is the third largest school district in the state of Apple Valley, Rosemount, Egan. Look at where their levy is in comparison with being that large of a school district, and we'd just be behind by, what, $700,000?
Ahead. We did
Sorry,
that.
yeah, ahead.
But we made them, they have the same number of students in this
Right.
example as we do.
But yeah, but then eliminate the Q count if that goes away.
Q count, yeah, which.
Yeah, and that levels the playing field. It's going the wrong direction. I'd rather us get the 2 million than everybody lose 2 million.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Any further discussion?
No, I'm thoroughly depressed.
I just want to end this with what I said 5 years ago when we did this. If it comes to 11, if it comes to cuts, the Shakopee residents get to decide what kind of school district that they want.
Right.
Well said.
Good last word.
First time for
With that, we'll move on to item 11, committee reports and other information. Let's start with Tim.
The only thing I've got was yet another action-packed night of celebrating teachers and retirees and all just the incredible work that we talk about. So all this conversation about money is it's that connection in the classroom. So it's good to be part of that.
Nothing from the committee, but on the subject of community engagement, I've gotten contacted by a handful of parents with some concerns and been attempting to learn more about them and vet those concerns. And, one was the woman that emailed us, was that just today? About wanting to transfer schools, and it's just hard to know because I don't know everything. I don't know what all she's gone through, who else she's talked to, how true everything is. So I'm just trying to learn, but some concerns that I'll probably bring to Dr. Redmond and Mr. McCloskey to talk about. And the other thing on the topic of community engagement is through the course of this, one of the people raised a concern that the school board didn't respond to their email. And I think it's probably important for us to establish some kind of protocol for who responds to community emails and what do we say, just so that doesn't happen. I mean, I don't think this is like a widespread issue, but it's an easy thing to address.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up. I'll comment on that too. I think one incident in question, a parent in the district raised a concern, and it was a significant concern for them. And historically, we answer as a district. That doesn't necessarily mean it's from a board member. So it'll be Dr. Redmond or an appropriate person on behalf of the district. But to your point, this person made the point that nobody from the board responded to them.
Sure.
And that kind of resonated with me because I hadn't really considered that. It's like, well, the district is responding, nobody was ignoring this person.
Right.
Their issue was being addressed, but it was a valid point that nobody from the board answered them. And so I kind of took that to heart,
Yeah.
that somebody from the board should reply to it, at least as an interim, just say, I'm forwarding this to the superintendent for action, but the board has received your email.
Right.
And I think that's appropriate, and so I have taken that, as something for myself.
What I usually
So that's good feedback.
do is so it feels, it can feel like we're being hamstrung when someone CCs the entire board, because then now we're subject to open meeting law, you can't reply at all. But I make a point to reply individually to the person to say, thanks for your email, it's going to the right place, or I've directed it to the right place. You know, and then some kind of comment directly related to, you know, if their kid is being bullied, I'm sorry this happened, and something to, like, we're human beings, you know? So.
You know, that's a really good point, Chad. In fact, again, I'm glad you brought up as well. Similarly, there were two separate issues. One, someone new to the district, and I forwarded to Jim because they were questioning, you know, if zones would change, just in terms of where they wanted to place their student. Another parent had some questions about just healthcare for a student with some special needs. And I was very clear, like, hey, let me put you in touch with the right people. I hear you. For every reason you just said, we can't respond as a board because there's rules around that from a communication perspective. But you can actually absolutely empathize and just say, let me put you in touch with the right people.
Sure.
Be that conduit, and then give it to the experts. Let Dr. Redmond, respond to really hard questions.
And typically,
That's the right
the
way.
chair of the board is a spokesperson for the board, and it's sort of a communication. So from a response from the board, it should come from Jeff as chair of the board currently.
The community doesn't recognize that, but, you know, they're obviously for.
Well,
When they're CCing everybody, I totally understand.
And the intent there is that we don't risk having two or more different responses that conflict with each other, or just don't align with each other. You know, we want to speak with one voice, which is why we do that. And so, yeah, I will take that on to make sure, you know, if a response from the board is warranted and I see that it's everybody's, I'll try to reply as quick as I can. And so, yeah, that's all good feedback.
Was at the teacher celebration Thursday, and I had a new one presented on the board, and I do love it. It's just a great event. And believe it or not, before our next school board meeting, we have graduation at Takata on June 5th, I think at 10, and high school graduation, June 7th, believe it or not, before our next meeting. Unbelievable. That school, the year's over already.
Yeah, to build on that, the Savor of the Night event for the teachers was great. And yeah, looking forward to all the great things we have coming up. Got my tickets for Harry Potter this weekend, really looking forward to that. And we had personnel tonight, and that's it for me.
Yeah, and personnel tonight, Southwest Metro, just continuing work on strategic plan, and I believe that will be brought forward to the board meeting next Tuesday night, hopefully for approval. So a lot of good work, hard work has been put into that, so that's great. Unfortunately, I wasn't at the event on Thursday night, which really disappointed me. I've missed a couple of them because MSBA's annual meeting is at the same time, so I was in beautiful St. Peter for 2 days last week, and we approved the budget for the next year. There will be a 2% increase in dues from MSBA for next school year, which is a very small amount. And then during that meeting, the next president-elect for MSBA was selected. And that is Tim Reardon from Rock Ridge, which is a conglomerate of schools in northern Minnesota, Virginia, Eveleth, and I can't remember the third one.
Gilbert.
Gilbert.
Oh, the
So
Whistling Bird,
we
great
had,
Jamaican restaurant.
All right.
very good. We had three really good candidates for president-elect, and so it was really hard to pick, and it took us a few rounds of voting, which is very unusual and was new to MSBA for the individual to be selected, so.
There's black smoke and white smoke.
I was just gonna say.
You know, believe it or not, that was all going on at the same time that we were doing our election, so there could have been.
Wow.
That's funny. And then I had a state high school league board meeting last week as well. I think that was on, remember, Tuesday or Wednesday. And we also discussed initial budget for 25-26 school year as well. And more to come on that. And I'm lucky enough to be on the finance committee for the state high school league. So more to come. That's all I got.
We had personnel tonight. I was at Saber the Night. It was a great event. Happy to hear that the community conversations have increased. That's really a great testament. And I bought my tickets to Harry Potter, so I'm excited about that. Next week, I plan to go to the feather ceremony. I believe it's next Thursday. I thought it was this week, but it's next week. So that's it.
Yeah, the Saber Night event was awesome. That was my first one. It was pretty neat. And I think those things are really impactful for times like this when we have to talk about it, because we see people that have had long distinguished careers and their coworkers and colleagues give them accolades and principals give them crap and all that stuff. It was entertaining. I also did a little bit more of the tour of the schools. Dr. Edmund and Mr. McCloskey brought me around. I skipped one of them because I stuck around at East Middle School for an extended time frame, which brought back like deja vu from the 8th grade, man, because that school looks just like I remember it. And it was, but it was awesome. It was a really impressive visit. I mean, that bell rung and there wasn't a kid in the hallways, and I walked around with Mr. Ellis from every classroom. His routine he does every morning, he's got it timed out, and he's quite a routine type individual. So it was awesome. I appreciate you guys again for the opportunity for that. So.
Yeah, earlier today I was at the Ed Walden conference at Mystic Lake, where I spoke with some folks from Big Trouble about some of the work our student school board members are doing, and we were invited this week to speak at a conference at the University of Minnesota about the partnership we have with Scott County and the work that we're doing on attendance and some of the innovative strategies that we're using.
Tiffany?
Chair Smith, my super quick highlights are summer school registration closed on Friday through 9th grade, incoming 9th graders, and excited to see all those students that'll get an extra boost over the summer. So that targeted service team is doing great. I believe you will be a part of our steering committee meeting that we have for the academies on Wednesday. We have 2 a year, and it's being hosted at the Link Center, and I know Elizabeth Deere and Mr. Palicki have done a lot to hopefully make that successful. We did hold our technical last systems and structures leadership meeting last week on Wednesday. Had some good progress, and that was held at the Shakopee Library. And then a couple events, there's all sorts on the list, but we also have a fun day on May 28th, which is National Decision Day. And then there's also senior awards and Saber Showcase and all those things happening at the high school, in addition to many concerts and many awards at our elementary and middle school. So if you're ever just free and want to wander around between now and the first June 5th, just let me know and I can give you about 10 choices of where you could go.
Thank you. Dr. Evans?
I just want to tell you a couple things about your presence. And again, I love that we've got people who get involved at the state level in doing that. But, you know, Saber the Night's a great example, board members showing up. You know, and again, I know I say it every time, Nick joins us for those walking around walkthroughs, classroom visits in the morning. people appreciate seeing our board members out and about, more than I think we know. And I applaud your efforts to do that. I know you're all incredibly busy people and your own families and work and things like that, but your presence means something to our staff and our teachers and our leaders, and they really appreciate you showing up, and I think it's the most, you know, we could talk about how much we care. Showing up really demonstrates how much you care, so thank you for doing that. You continue to do that very consistently, and people do notice.
So I think you stand too close to you when you're walking around. We want that teacher. We can't be holding hands as we walk around. So.
No, that would be odd. Now he says so.
Next on our agenda is the upcoming meetings and important dates. So we talked about a lot of things going on. Yes, we've got a band concerts yet this week. I think there's one right now, right, that we're missing?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and then, but we've got more coming up here, and then Saber Showcase, Senior Awards, yeah, lots of great things coming up, and then Harry Potter, and then of course graduation, feather ceremony, yeah, lots of great things. So, anything else we should bring to attention? It's either on this slide or. Okay. With that, I would entertain a motion to adjourn. Second. Motion by Peterson, a second by Brophy. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Meeting adjourned.